Chapter 290. Commander Xiang, I come with sincerity to present the treasure to His Majesty. Lu Hai had been the head of the family for more than 10 years. At present, the situation was not good, but he still kept calm and said in a deep voice, "This is the treasure of my family. Only by giving it to His Majesty in person can I feel at ease. Otherwise, if it is replaced halfway, who can I ask for justice? And you can't afford it." Commander Xiang's face changed slightly and became a little ugly. Lu Hai didn't give him face at all, but what he said was not unreasonable. If Lu Hai really cheated him with a fake poisonous insect king, he would not only not be rewarded, but also be severely punished by His Majesty. Although Lu Hai was probably scaring him, this kind of risk he didn't need to take. Thinking of this, Commander Xiang snorted coldly and waved his right hand. The Imperial guards behind him all made way for him. Then he stepped aside and said lightly, "Please, head of the Lu family." Lu Hai breathed a sigh of relief and said with a fist and palm salute, "Thank you." After that, he immediately disappeared into the palace gate with many guards behind him. Commander Xiang couldn't help but sneer. "Oh, stupid. The three brothers of the Lu family still have a low vision. They can't do anything to us." How could he not see that Lu Hai entered the palace with an ulterior purpose? But a small family that survived with the poisonous insect king also wanted to compete with the royal family? Did he really think that the Wei family would be afraid of the poisonous insect king of the longevity realm? He had seen the old ancestor of the longevity realm of the family with his own eyes. His power was much more horrible than the poisonous insect king. The royal family didn't attack the Lu family just because they were no longer a threat. Now that the Lu family came to die and sent a poisonous insect king, there was no reason to reject them. Under the care of Commander Xiang, Lu Hai and his party entered the palace without any hindrance and went all the way to the palace hall. The middle-aged man with a square face on the throne in the hall wore a yellow robe. He was dignified without being angry, with the elegance of a scholar. No one would think that he was the master of the Wei family, Wei Yanghong, who had stirred up a bloody storm in Nanjiang country these years. At this moment, Wei Yanghong glanced at the three brothers of the Lu family and finally fixed his eyes on Lu Hai. With a faint smile, he said, "Master of the Lu family, a wise man submits to circumstances. It is the right choice to offer the Gu King to me." Lu Hai's knuckles that were holding onto the box were so tight that they turned white. He did not reply. He had already completed everything here. Why was the mysterious girl still not moving? Wei Yanghong's sixth senses were extremely sharp. Lu Hai's hesitation immediately made him feel that something was amiss. At this time, Su Li, who was wearing the armor of the Lu family, finally said indifferently, "Do it." Before she finished her words, hundreds of men of sacrifice of spiritual realm shot out with dense, killing intent. In less than 3 breaths, the 700 Imperial Army soldiers guarding the hall were all killed. The burst of aura caused Wei Yanghong's expression to change slightly. More than 100 guards of the Lu clan were all Xiantian realm cultivators. Something was amiss. Assassin. Guards. The sharp voice of a eunuch beside Wei Yanghong broke through the sky, and he himself also burst out the aura of the peak of the pre-celestial stage, blocking in front of Wei Yanghong, and chopped towards the nearest Lu Hai. How dare the Lu clan collude with outsiders? Die! The director of the Imperial Palace turned out to be a hidden senior. The three brothers of the Lu family retreated in horror. At this moment, a flash of sword light suddenly broke out from the side. So fast. Oh no! The old eunuch roared ferociously and wanted to avoid it, but the sword was so fast that he had no time to react. At the moment when he saw the sword light, the result was already doomed. The old eunuch's face immediately froze, and then a line of blood appeared on his neck. His head fell down with a thud sound. Before he made any achievement, he was beheaded by a sword. Lu Hai stared blankly at the headless body that fell on the ground, and then looked in the direction of the sword light. He happened to see Fang Yuan put away his sword. He was also at the peak of the pre-celestial stage, but he was killed by Fang Yuan, who was only 20 years old. At this time, Lu He knew that Feng Yuan's strength was much more horrible than he imagined. After killing the obstacles around Wei Yanghong, Feng Yuan stepped forward indifferently and grabbed Wei Yanghong, who was still pretending to be calm. He pulled him in front of Su Li and threw him fiercely. Lu Hai and others heard a clear crack sound, and their scalps were numb. "Who the hell are you?" Wei Yanghong endured the severe pain between his knees, looked up and glanced at Feng Yuan, Chu Qingming and others, and finally looked at Su Li. "Are you the reinforcement brought by these juniors?" Su Li smiled slightly and said, "I'm not a reinforcement. It's just a deal." "Huh." Wei Yanghong suddenly laughed when he heard the words. "Girl, you are too young. Although I don't understand how the juniors of these three families persuaded you to fight against me. You must have been cheated. How can you imagine the background of my Wei family?" Su Li's face was indifferent, as if she was indifferent. Wei Yanghong saw this, but he did not stop persuading her and continued to say, "I know all the forces of Nanjiang country. You are not a citizen of Nanjiang country, so you have no grievance with my Wei family. Why do you want to get involved? If you let me go and leave with your people, I will not pursue it. But if you are still stubborn, no one can leave here today. No grievance," Su Li repeated, and her little face bloomed with a smile. "Your Majesty, let me ask you, who made the decision to cooperate with the Hahuan sect to deal with the Ling family?" Wei Yanghong's face changed in an instant. How could this woman know such a secret? Just when he was in doubt, there was a buzzing sound around the hall, and then there was a burst of fog in the hall, which wrapped the whole hall. Tactical matrix? Lu Hai and others immediately reacted and looked around at the dare-to-die soldiers of the spiritual realm who had been hidden in the fog. At this moment, they understood what Su Li wanted to do. As long as there was a tactical matrix, they would take the initiative. The Wei family could not crush them by numbers, but by strength. "Well, head of the Wei family, you need to delay time, and I happen to need it too. But now the tactical matrix has been formed, so don't talk nonsense. I see that the people of your Wei family are also outside the hall. Why don't you go with me?" Su Li said with a smile. Wei Yanghong only felt a chill. His purpose had already been seen through by this woman at a glance. Before he could resist, Feng Yuan had carried him to the edge of the tactical matrix outside the hall. Looking around, the square under the stone steps outside the hall was densely packed with imperial guards. Many princes and princesses came one after another, including the sixth princess, Wei Jinjin. Standing in the front was a white-haired old man in a black robe. When this person saw Feng Yuan carrying Wei Yanghong, whose legs were broken, his face instantly became gloomy. "Junior, it seems that you're not going to leave here alive." Feng Yuan smiled coldly and did not answer. Su Li glanced at the old man in a black robe and said softly, "Are you Wei Hetian, the old ancestor of the Wei family?" Hearing this, the old man in a black robe noticed the petite Su Li standing on one side. At this time, he noticed that both Feng Yuan and others stood at least half a body behind Su Li. The real speaker turned out to be her. The old man in a black robe was shocked, but he didn't show any strange expression on his face. He said sarcastically, "You are just a silly girl. How can you be qualified to see the old ancestor of the Wei family? I am Wei Sun, the first elder of the Wei family." When Wei Jinjin saw Su Li, there was a touch of doubt in her eyes. After a moment, she suddenly exclaimed, "Princess Li, are you Princess Li of the Dahan country, Su Li?" The old man in a black robe's face changed slightly. Did the Dongfang family even come here? Su Li glanced at Wei Jinjin and didn't look at her. She chuckled and said, "Princess Li, I am not a member of the Dongfang family. Maybe the first elder can call me Mr. Li. Mr. Li, are you Mr. Li?" The old man in a black robe's face changed dramatically. After the auction of the Dahan country, the name was no longer limited to the Dahan country. Of course, he had heard of it. It was said that Mr. Li's medical skills were no worse than Qi Xianqing's, and his cultivation was unfathomable. But who could think that Mr. Li was actually a girl of 16 or 17 years old? Wei Yanghong, it seems that you are not important enough to draw out the old ancestor of the Wei family. Seeing that Wei Sun didn't respond for the time being, Su Li chuckled beside Wei Yanghong. Wei Yanghong looked strange, but his tone didn't change. Su Li, the first elder, is in charge of the affairs of the Wei family. His power is still above me. If you have any request, you can say it now. Request? Su Li covered her mouth and chuckled. When she was about to say something, Wei Sun, who was very close to her, suddenly moved. Swish! Under his old body, a strong force broke out. The floor tiles under his feet suddenly exploded. He turned into a residual shadow and rushed to Su Li, almost making a sonic boom in the air. At the same time, his right palm became a claw and fiercely grabbed Su Li's delicate neck. Seeing that Su Li seemed to be scared by the sudden attack and was stunned, he was happy in his heart. Since Su Li was the master, as long as he controlled Su Li, everything could be solved easily. Just at the moment when his palm was about to touch her neck, Su Li suddenly showed a strange smile on her face. "Oh no, I am tricked!" Wei Sun screamed in his heart. When he was about to withdraw his hand, he suddenly appeared like a phantom and grabbed Wei Sun's wrist with one hand. Then a clear crack resounded through the nothingness. Wei Sun groaned and wanted to borrow the force of his palm to get away. But Xian followed him closely like a maggot in a tarsal bone. In the blink of an eye, Xian had hit Wei Sun 4 or 5 times. Bang! 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 Every time he was hit, Wei Sun took a step back. Until the last hit, he barely stood still, but he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. He was too strong. Wei Sun looked at Xian, he who looked indifferent in horror. This person was definitely not the first hurdle of the longevity realm like him. At least, he was at the peak of the first hurdle. He was not his opponent at all. Thinking of this, Wei Sun glanced at Wei Yanghong, who still had the desire to survive in his eyes. A ruthless look flashed across his face. When Wei Zhenjin and other princes and princesses were stunned, he decisively ordered. Chapter 291. First Elder, no. Father is still in their hands. Wei Zhenjin and other princes and princesses exclaimed, but Wei Sun didn't seem to hear it. The imperial guards executed the order without hesitation. For a time, hundreds of condensed beams of spiritual power shot to the place where Su Li was. Su Li smiled slightly and took Wei Yanghong a step back unhurriedly, just isolating all the attacks outside the tactical matrix. Wei Sun's face suddenly changed, and he found that there was a big tactical matrix around the palace. Hundreds of beams of spiritual power bombarded on it, but didn't make any waves. What level of the big tactical matrix was it? The defensive ability was so strong. Seeing Wei Sun's shocked face, Su Li didn't forget to laugh in a low voice. "It seems that you, the Emperor, are more useless than I thought. You have worked hard to build the country, but you have to give it to others." Wei Yanghong's face was pale, and his forehead was full of cold sweat. It was unknown whether it was because of excessive blood loss or because of Wei Sun's ruthlessness. He snorted coldly. "Instead of letting you occupy my Nanjiang country, it is better to help the descendants of my Wei family. You want to take me as a hostage? You should just give up on this idea." Well said. Surrounded by the array of imperial guards, Wei Sun approached the edge of the tactical matrix. Hearing Wei Yanghong's words, he loudly praised, "Su Li, no matter who you are, you can't leave alive today." Xiang Shi, Commander Xiang, whose name was called, stepped forward with trepidation and said quickly, "First Elder, the order of emergency assembly has been issued. In a few minutes, the entire city guards of Tinggu City will be here. At that time, these thieves can't escape." Seeing Xiang Shi pretending to be confident, Wei Sun snorted coldly and said in a cold voice, "Go and prepare. After this matter, you will be investigated for dereliction of duty." "Yes, yes, First Elder, I will go now." Seeing that Wei Sun didn't teach him a lesson, Xiang Shi was relieved and left in a hurry. After dealing with this matter, Wei Sun turned his head and grinned. "Stupid. Little girl, do you think that you can run amok in the territory of my Wei family with a senior of the second hurdle of the longevity realm and a turtle shell? You've brought less than 100 people with you. How strong can the formation you've set up be? If 1,000 people can't break it, what about 10,000 people? How about 100,000 people? Su Li raised her eyebrows and did not answer. Wei Sun was relieved and concluded that Su Li had no power to struggle. His tone became sharp. I'll give you two choices now. First, release the family leader, and your people will take my Wei family's vital goo and listen to my orders, fighting for Wei family. Not only can you keep your life, but you can also enjoy glory, splendor, wealth, and even a certain amount of power in the Wei family. As for you, an evil light flashed in Wei Sun's eyes. It would be a pity if he took the life goo at such a young age. I'm lacking a goddaughter to serve me. If you agree, I can guarantee that you won't need to consume the life goo, and no one in the entire Wei family will be able to bully you. What do you think? After that, Wei Sun looked forward to Su Li's answer. Wei Jinjin was anxious and said angrily, First Elder, Su Li is the culprit. She broke my father's legs and has no dignity. How can you let her go? How dare you? Don't you have the right to make decisions for me? Wei Sun scolded angrily. When he was about to say something, there was a burst of applause in the tactical formation. Clap, 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 clap. Seeing Wei Sun turn his head, Su Li stopped and shook her head. I really don't understand how such a stupid family can sit on the throne of country. Wei Sun was furious when he heard the words, but Su Li interrupted him before he could say anything harsh. Fine, Xian He, do it. Since the old ancestor of Wei family doesn't come out, let's force him out. Xian He immediately flashed out and slapped at Wei Sun with his cold palms. If the master was humiliated, the subject would die. Wei Sun's offending words just now had aroused his real anger, and he slapped with all his strength. The airwave was like a terrible hurricane, blowing the Imperial Guard around. Wei Sun, who thought he was safe in the tactical formation, immediately panicked. They couldn't stop it. The tactical formation of 1,000 people couldn't stop it. This was a tactical formation composed of 1,000 people at the peak of the acquired realm. This person was more than just the second hurdle of the longevity realm. Wei Sun had no time to remind them. Without saying a word, he ran back crazily. He escaped with his life for a while, but those Imperial Guards were not so lucky. Under the pressure of the horrible palm, they burst in a blood mist one after another. Panic immediately spread, and they fled in all directions. They had worked hard to get to where they were. They had entered the army for a way out, not to die for the Wei family. Damn it, stop it for me, a group of ungrateful people. Wei Sun scolded crazily, exerted his body movement to the extreme, and struggled to support Xian He. As long as he held on for 5 minutes, he could get a chance to live. 5 minutes, at the thought of this, Wei Sun wanted to curse again. If it weren't for these Imperial Guards who fled, he wouldn't have fallen into such a miserable situation. Traitors, all of you are traitors. When the reinforcements come, you will all die. Wei Sun scolded. Under the oppression of Xian he soon couldn't even speak. But as the first elder of the Wei family, he had been immersed in the first hurdle of the longevity realm for decades. He barely survived with his unique means, and he only hoped that the reinforcements would come soon. Even if he was in the third hurdle of the longevity realm, he couldn't survive under the pressure of 100,000 city guards. Under the protection of the inborn senior, Wei Jinjin barely escaped to the side of the palace, but other less talented princes and princesses were not so lucky. They had become a part of the blood mist in the sky. Princess, this person's cultivation is really terrible. The first elder can't stop him. Let's go to ask the old ancestor to come out. The guard beside her reminded her in time. Wei Jinjin, who was at a loss, finally grasped a life-saving straw. Her eyes brightened. Yes, the old ancestor of the Wei family is still alive. Hurry up. I'm going to ask the old ancestor to come out. Go. Wei Jinjin didn't care about her usual arrogance. She just grabbed the guard's arm and was taken away by him. She didn't know that her every word and deed was seen by Su Li. Fang Yuan stared coldly at the direction where Wei Jinjin left. He leaned over and touched the hilt of the sword. But at this moment, Su Li stopped him with one hand. In Fang Yuan's puzzled eyes, she smiled slightly. Don't worry. Cast a long line to catch a big fish. You will take action later. Fang Yuan stopped and returned to Su Li. After a moment, he suddenly raised his head and said to Su Li, "Thank you." "What are you thanking me for?" Su Li didn't look back at him. She said in an ethereal tone, "In fact, everything I do is for myself. If you thank me, I will feel awkward." Fang Yuan frowned. He didn't understand. Nanjiang country and Su Li had nothing to do with each other. How could they be together? Later, you will understand. Su Li didn't say much. She squatted down and gently pinched Wei Yanghong's wrist with her nails. But after a long time, no life ring appeared. "It's a native spirit of the Neverland." Su Li was disappointed. Then she threw Wei Yanghong between Fang Yuan and Chu Qingning without hesitation. "He is useless. Which one of you will do it?" Before she finished her words, a knife light flashed from Chu Qingning's waist and cut Wei Yanghong's neck in an instant. Wei Yanghong didn't even have time to beg for mercy. "You broke the rules." In Shuedong pulled out the dagger halfway and put it back angrily. Chu Qingning smiled and said, "Don't be angry. I killed him because you killed him. I will avenge you. Besides, there will be enemies to kill later. You don't need to care about this one." Chu Qingning looked at Fang Yuan and Fang Mu, whose faces were dark. He subconsciously lowered his voice. "At worst, I will let you kill some people later." After saying this, Fang Mu looked much better. His eldest brother broke Wei Yanghong's legs at least. Brother Ning and Sister Tong were a family. He was the most miserable one. He didn't even touch Wei Yanghong's hair. No one thought whether it was wrong to despise Wei Yanghong's life. The hatred of exterminating a family was absolutely irreconcilable. Only when the blood of the Wei family flowed like a river could they relieve the hatred in their hearts. The time to finish half a cup of tea passed quickly, but to Wei Sun, every breath of time was so long. Facing Xian He's continuous attacks, his mind had been exhausted to the extreme. If Xian He hadn't only used his bare hands to deal with him, he would probably have died long ago. Just when Wei Sun thought he was going to die, a lot of fluctuations suddenly sounded behind him. "Kill, kill, kill, kill. Kill all the traitors and protect the emperor." The city guards finally came. Wei Sun was overjoyed, but the joy didn't last for half a breath. A pair of white, jade-like palms suddenly appeared. These are not Xian He's hands. Wei Sun was frightened. The last strength in his body broke out, and he wanted to avoid it. But he retreated quickly, and the speed of the palms was faster. In the blink of an eye, his pubic region was broken like a phantom. Wei Sun only felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. His genuine energy was exhausted, and his breath was instantly weak. The hands didn't seem to give him time to be sad. They held his shoulders, and Wei Sun felt dizzy. When he woke up again, he found himself in the palace, and Wei Yanghong, who had just died, was lying next to him. He was caught and brought into the palace in the blink of an eye. No matter how bad his situation was, he was also in the longevity realm. His genuine energy was restrained in a gang, and it was as hard as a rock. How could his cultivation be so easily broken? Was it possible that in addition to Xian He, there were people in the fourth realm of longevity realm, or even more horrible people in the dark? Wei Sun looked confused and frustrated. He raised his head and saw Xian. He hurriedly returned to the palace. Under his puzzled gaze, he suddenly knelt down and said sadly, "It's my fault to let Highly Great Master take action in person." Highly Great Master? Looking at the direction where Xian He knelt down, Wei Sun saw the person who was called Highly Great Master. The confusion on his face instantly turned into dullness. "It doesn't matter. I just did on a whim. You don't have to blame yourself." Su Li waved her hand and looked at the dense and overwhelming city guards outside. She said, "Well, let's go on to the next step. They should also arrive." Just as Su Li's voice fell, a burst of bright light suddenly burst in the slightly dim palace. Chapter 292. In the originally spacious hall, mysterious patterns that were formed by items that contained spiritual power had appeared out of nowhere. It was another big tactical matrix. Wei Sun took a closer look and found that the complexity of this tactical matrix was far more than those he usually saw, so he couldn't guess the origin of this tactical matrix from the patterns. But soon he understood the function of this tactical matrix. Rumble. The spiritual power of heaven and earth gathered from the nothingness with a muffled sound, and then a mysterious power was emitted from the tactical matrix. The space in the tactical matrix suddenly became unreal like flowers in the fog. Then whoosh, 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 whoosh. One after another, unidentified people appeared from the tactical matrix. The fluctuation of the space didn't stop until there were no more people standing in the tactical matrix space. Then there were 218 people in the spacious hall. Transmission matrix. It's the long-lost transmission matrix. Wei Sun's face was pale, and his lips trembled. There was no hope in his eyes. Instead, there was a deep panic about the future of the Wei family. In just half a cup of tea's time, they had arranged a teleportation array, and none of the warriors that were teleported out were at the Xiantian 5th stage. With such a quality army, they could easily fight against 100 enemies. The tens of thousands of city guards outside could at most be on par with them. What's more, the fluctuation of the transmission matrix didn't stop. The sound of the city guards attacking the protective matrix gradually became louder, but Wei Sun turned a deaf ear to it. He stared at groups of warriors of the inborn realm coming out of the transmission matrix. Until there were 2,000 warriors, Wei Sun finally couldn't stand the blow and fainted. Highly great master. Xianni came over and saw Suli frowning slightly. He quickly changed his words. Master, the palace is too small, and we can't fit more people. But 2,000 spiritual guards are definitely enough to sweep away all the obstacles outside. Suli nodded slightly and looked up, then stopped. Suli nodded slightly and looked up. Let's stop. It's almost time. As soon as she finished her words, the team of 100 people who maintained the tactical matrix suddenly vomited blood, and a series of sounds like glass breaking came from the tactical matrix above their heads. The protective matrix was broken. Who dares to disturb my peace? An old voice that was calm, but filled with anger exploded in the void. Xianni's expression changed slightly as he raised his head to look. Sure enough, he saw a slightly stooped old man in linen slowly walking over from the horizon. The old man's appearance was very ordinary. If it wasn't for the background of the surrounding scene, he would look more like an old farmer working in the countryside. However, as soon as Xianni's eyes fell onto this person, there seemed to be a brilliant light behind the latter, and it actually caused him to be slightly unable to open his eyes. Not good. First prime, this person is definitely a Void Realm expert. I'm definitely not his opponent. Only the top 5 building masters can deal with him. Xianni cursed. The Void Realm was also the 5 realms of longevity. Upon reaching this realm, the physical body and the heaven and earth would form a natural cycle, and the cultivator would be able to break free from gravity and stand in the air like an immortal. His strength was beyond the imagination of the cultivators in the first 4 stages of longevity realm. Xianni was lucky enough to see the first head of spiritual realm in action. His strength was really earth-shattering and could topple mountains and overturn seas. Suli narrowed her eyes slightly and stared at the old ancestor of the Wei family, who was walking leisurely. Wei Hetian. No wonder that the Wei family had internal and external troubles and provoked many troubles, but it was never destroyed. Instead, it became more and more powerful. It turned out that there was such a great Buddha in charge. Even in the spiritual circle, such a cultivation was top, and there would be no decent resistance in a martial arts circle. When Suli was thinking, the old man had come to the front of the hall. When he saw Wei Yanghong, who had fallen in a pool of blood and lost his breath, and Wei Sun, whose cultivation was destroyed, his calm face was suddenly broken. 2 important juniors of the Wei family were killed by you, and 1 was injured. Then all of you will stay and die with them. He didn't ask any questions or even Su Li's name, and directly made a judgment. Decisively kill. The momentum of the Void Realm swept the hall like a wave, and even the sky became gloomy at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was extremely depressing. What kind of old monster is this? Chu Qingning was scared and screamed. Yin Xuedong's beautiful face turned pale. Even Fang Yuan, who always walked in front of everyone, couldn't help but look pale and tense. Xianni's face changed dramatically. He stood in front of Su Li and hurriedly transmitted the sound. Highly great master, take everyone to escape. The transmission matrix can still be used. As long as you reverse the lines to the spiritual realm, you will be safe. Su Li took a deep breath, and the genuine energy in her body immediately began to run according to a strange track. At the same time, she felt a faint tingling in her wrist, which was a sign that her foundation was about to be consumed violently. Suddenly, a gray shadow flashed from the sky at a very fast speed. Fast. It was as fast as a swan. In less than a blink of an eye, the gray shadow actually came to Wei Hetian and then stretched out his hand to Wei Hetian's palm. The next moment, boom! The shock wave blasted the solid palace into powder in an instant and completely became history. And it spread at a very fast speed, causing countless palace groups to collapse. Chu Qingning was shocked to see the imperial palace become flat. Just a fight between the two people made a small part of the imperial palace collapse. Oh, Xianhe breathed a sigh of relief, and his face showed joy. The material of this palace was extraordinary. It blocked 70% of the impact. With his buffer, there were no casualties in the palace. But outside the palace, Xianhe pitifully looked at the blood foam piled up like a mountain outside. Tens of thousands of city guards did not play much role and died in the hands of their own people. Do you know this person? Su Li calmed the boiling, genuine energy in her body, and the tingling in her wrist also eased. Then she had time to ask. Xianhe hurriedly said, Master, the person is the second head of the spiritual realm, Yu Wuhai, who is in charge of the secular spiritual realm. Now he must be aware of your crisis, so he took the initiative to fight. Su Li nodded slightly, looking at the two people who constantly collided in the sky and set off waves of horrible fluctuations. She stopped talking. After all, Yu Wuhai was the third head of the spiritual realm, and his cultivation was even higher than Wei Hetian's. Soon Wei Hetian showed signs of defeat, and it would not take long for him to be completely defeated. But if you want to capture him alive, Su Li's eyes flashed. It would take some time for the result of the battle to come out. She walked to Wei Sun and stabbed Wei Sun's wrist with one finger. Suddenly, a faint blue light lit up. Life ring. An outsider. A cold light flashed in Su Li's eyes immediately. She immediately stood up and ordered, Put this person in prison. Don't hurt his life. I still need him. Xianhe naturally took the order and sent someone to take Wei Sun away to protect him. So he didn't hide this scene. Fang Yuan, Chu Qingning, and others all saw it clearly. Su Li stood up and saw the doubt in Fang Mu's eyes. She smiled slightly and looked at Fang Yuan. Don't you have anything to ask? Chu Qingning opened his mouth and wanted to say something. Before he spoke, he was interrupted by Fang Yuan. I believe you. Fang Mu saw the firm look on his eldest brother's face and immediately swallowed the question in his throat. It was a little hard to hold it. Fang Yuan's expression remained unchanged. He fixed his eyes on Su Li and barely hid the passion in his eyes. I believe that you must have your reasons for doing this. I won't ask. If you want to tell me one day, I will be happy to listen. Brother Fang, In Xuedong hesitated. The Wei family was the enemy of all of them. If Su Li kept the lives of the Wei family, how should they face their deceased relatives? Su Li glanced at In Xuedong with an eternal smile on her face. I won't keep their lives. But they can't die now. When could they die? In Xuedong wanted to ask, but she didn't say it in the end. Along the way, although many of Su Li's actions were unclear and even unbelievable, without exception, Su Li told them with facts that the decisions she made were correct. The seed of trust had long been buried in their hearts. Even if they were facing the enemy of the extermination of their families at the moment, everyone chose to believe in Su Li's decision after hesitating for a moment. Fang Yuan, thank you. A sweet smile appeared on Su Li's lips. Fang Yuan's heart moved slightly, and the scene in front of him became a little unreal. Except for Ling Li, she had never shown such an expression to anyone. At this moment, what Su Li brought to him was not happiness, but a deep uneasiness. She would never change what she decided, which once made him desperate. He could only numb himself with crazy practice. But now, did Su Li's change indicate something? God didn't give Fang Yuan too much time to think. Soon, there was a violent fluctuation in the nothingness. Then a gray shadow flashed. A middle-aged drinker with a stubble beard and untidy appearance appeared in front of everyone, dragging Wei Haqian, who was like a dead dog. A touch of surprise flashed in Su Li's eyes. He actually captured Wei Haqian by himself. His strength was beyond her imagination. "Lord Wuhai, I'm Xianhe." Xianhe stepped forward and saluted. Yu Wuhai nodded slightly and passed Xianhe, leaving Wei Haqian in front of Su Li. After glancing at her, he said without respect, "Are you Su Li?" Su Li was indifferent and silent. Yu Wuhai didn't get angry. He said in a plain tone, as if he was stating a fact, "Although I don't know why Lord Jing Xin regards you as her master, a little girl who is only in the longevity realm doesn't deserve to be the great master. It's not up to you to decide whether I deserve it or not." Su Li retorted lightly. Yu Wuhai showed a touch of sarcasm on his face and said firmly, "Lord Jing Xin will definitely wake up. At that time, you will taste the bitter fruit. It's not up to you to decide my ending." Su Li's expression didn't change at all. Yu Wuhai snorted coldly. "You deserve to be the existence who can bewitch Lord Jing Xin. It's a pity that such a state of mind is not used in the right way. Before that, I will still unconditionally carry out the orders that Lord Jing Xin arranged about you. But it doesn't mean that I believe you. I will thoroughly investigate what happened that day. You, take care of yourself." After Yu Wuhai finished his words, he didn't wait for Su Li's reply. He turned around and disappeared in the sky. Chapter 293. Yu Wuhai's bad attitude towards Su Li immediately made Xianhe, who had been praising him, feel extremely embarrassed. Until Yu Wuhai's figure completely disappeared in the sky, Xianhe said embarrassedly, "Master, no need to say more." There was no sign of anger on Su Li's calm face. "Go and do your work." Xianhe, who wanted to say a few more good words for Yu Wuhai, could only helplessly respond. He walked to the 2,000 spiritual guards and gave an order. The spiritual guards immediately turned into ghosts and rushed to other directions in the imperial palace. For a time, the imperial palace was in chaos again. Cries and screams were almost continuous. Without Wei Haqian, the pillar, the remaining effective forces of the Wei family didn't cause any trouble under the internal strife of the spiritual guards. After a long time, the imperial palace returned to silence. "Master, there is an unexpected discovery." He suddenly came, holding a young girl in his hand. Although she was dressed in an ordinary maid's costume and her face was dirty, Su Li recognized that she was Wei Zhenjin at a glance. "Good luck," Su Li commented. Wei Zhenjin tried hard to suppress her fear and said with hatred, "Don't talk nonsense. If you want to kill me or torture me, do as you wish." To be able to say such words, it seemed that this sixth princess was inexperienced. Su Li shook her head slightly. She flicked her fingers and shot a hidden force into Wei Zhenjin's naguan. An orange halo instantly lit up on Wei Zhenjin's wrist. What is this?" Wei Zhenjin was frightened. She never knew that there was such a strange existence hidden in her body. Su Li narrowed her eyes and ordered, "Take her away and put her in solitary confinement." Light blue, dark blue, light orange. There were 3 different colors among the outsiders she had found, but they were not similar to her without exception. She still remembered that her life ring was as red as blood. It seems that more people are needed for comparison to know the law of the life ring. Thinking of this, scarlet light flashed in Su Li's eyes. She immediately turned into the transmission matrix and disappeared in the imperial palace. After a while, as Xianhe took everyone to evacuate, the huge imperial palace became deserted and desolate. The wind whimpered incessantly, like a mournful wail. Only the bloodstains under the broken walls that had yet to dry were the only witnesses of that earth-shattering battle. 2 days later, the entire Tiangu city fell into an extremely strange tranquility. No one acted rashly. No one dared to go to the palace to see what had happened. The fluctuations emitted from Yu Wuhai's battle were enough to envelop the entire Tiangu city. It was a power beyond the imagination of all the families in Tiangu city. No one could survive more than a breath under this power. However, no matter how afraid these families were, time was passing. After a full 8 days, the imperial palace was as silent as a ghost town. Finally, someone gathered the courage to enter the palace to investigate. With this glance, he was terrified out of his wits, and his soul almost left his body. The message he sent out made all the clans in Tiangu City dumbfounded and shocked. The Wei family had actually been exterminated 10 days ago. No one from the royal family was left alive. The city guards were completely annihilated. Terrifying, terrifying. In the hearts of everyone in Tiangu City, only these two words were constantly echoing. After a short period of chaos, all the clans seemed extremely obedient and quiet. It seemed that they were waiting for something. During this time, Suli had been staying in the spiritual realm to wait for the result. There were tens of thousands of people caught alive. She couldn't confirm everyone by herself. She could only ask Xianhe to send someone to do it for her, and she chose to practice herself. Compared with the outbreak of the secret method, it seemed more cost-effective to get superpower for a short period of time and break through the realm through cultivation. If she was right, if she could set foot on the 6 realms of longevity and then break the secret method of the spiritual realm to compete with the supernatural realm, it was enough to kill the enemy 5 times in the same realm. In the whole environment, the only one Su Li was afraid of was the old ancestor of Shaoshan Palace. If she could fight 5 times, it was enough to deal with any emergency. Bang! In the addendum, there was a light sound. Su Li, who was sitting on the ground, was surrounded by stars, and then naturally occupied 20% of the genuine energy. The integration of the star force and the genuine energy, 10%, is the first realm. Now, I have occupied 20% of the genuine energy, and I have broken through. Suli opened her eyes and muttered to herself. In less than 8 days, she directly stepped into the second realm from the first realm of longevity. Although it was because of the previous accumulation, such an amazing speed of breakthrough could only happen to her. After stabilizing her cultivation, Su Li gave up the idea of continuing to practice because Xianhe had been waiting outside the addendum for 2 days. Boom! The stone door made a dull sound, and Xianhe immediately noticed it and greeted, "Great Master, welcome to come out of practice." Then he suddenly found something and said with joy, "Congratulations, Great Master." The pneuma of Su Li's breakthrough was not stable yet, and he immediately noticed it. But he was not surprised because of his identity, and he didn't know that Su Li had broken through the longevity realm for less than a year. There is nothing to be happy about. Tell me the result. Su Li shook her head. Her cultivation came from the foundation, and there was nothing to be happy about. Seeing this, Xianhe immediately misunderstood and secretly admired Great Master's high state of mind. When he just broke through the second realm of longevity, he couldn't be as calm as Su Li. First Saint Lord, among the 10,000 people we caught, only a little over 100 have the bright bracelets you mentioned. Among them, 90% have light blue bracelets, 10% have dark blue bracelets, and only Wei Jinjin has orange bracelets. Su Li nodded and was not surprised about the result. She had already guessed the quality of a life ring. Keep the 100 people and detain them separately. Guard them carefully. Give the people of the Wei family to Feng Yuan and others. As for the relatives of other surnames, leave them to Jing Xin. She will know how to deal with them. Su Li ordered, and Xianhe agreed repeatedly. He was old-fashioned, so he would not doubt Su Li's orders. After dealing with the people of the Wei family, Xianhe raised his head and wanted to say something, but he hesitated and said carefully, "Great Master, the thing you asked me to do before seems to be a little troublesome." "Huh?" Su Li slightly raised her eyebrows. "What trouble?" Xianhe said with a wry smile. "It seems that none of your friends are willing to take over the Nanjiang country." As soon as it was mentioned, Xianhe thought of the scene of contact with Feng Yuan and the other 3 people, and his mouth could not help but twitch slightly. He first found Fang Yuan, but before he finished speaking, Fang Yuan turned around and left. He only said coldly, "I want to practice." Then, he didn't believe it and found Chu Qingning. This time, he said everything. Chu Qingning also seemed to be very interested in the throne of the Nanjiang country. But before he agreed, Yin Xuedong grabbed his ear and screamed away. When he arrived, he was shocked to hear Yin Xuedong's reply with a smile. "Lord Xian, please tell Sister Su Li that my husband is half to the throne." Point. Interest. All. No. Yes. I am enough for him. Ah. Tong, be gentle. You are trying to murder your husband. After a period of stunning noise, Xian found the harmless and sunny teenager, Feng Mu. "Wherever my eldest brother goes, I will go. Lord Xian, I'm really sorry." Feng Mu saluted and ran away quickly. The throne coveted by all families in the Tinggu city was like a snake or a scorpion in front of these four people. They were afraid to avoid it and get into trouble. Xian sighed. However, as a friend of highly great master, if he really took a fancy to the throne in the secular world, he would probably doubt the eyes of highly great master, right? Thinking of this, Xian couldn't help but laugh at his contradictory thoughts. Suli didn't know what he was laughing at, but she didn't bother to ask more. She said indifferently, "Since you are not willing, then forget it. Go and make it clear to the people of the Liu family. At least in 10 years, the Nanjiang country will be used by me." "Only 10 years?" Xian said in amazement. "Is it too little?" The practitioners of the longevity realm could meditate for several years in isolation. 10 years was really too short. Suli shook her head and smiled, but said, 10 years is enough. If her plan went well, she could wait for death quietly in less than 10 years. Naturally, she didn't need the help of the Nanjiang country. If it didn't go well, she couldn't live more than 10 years. Then I will send someone to contact the Liu family. I believe that as long as they are not fools, they will not refuse. I will also secretly help the Nanjiang country to become a great help for highly great master as soon as possible. Well, you go to do your work. After this matter is finished, I should go back. In 10 days, maybe Lingli had returned to Yunjing City. If she delayed again, there would be trouble. If the transmission matrix of the spiritual realm didn't only allow people to enter the spiritual realm from the outside world, she would like to directly arrange the transmission matrix to return to Yunjing. "Goodbye, highly great master." Xian bowed his head to salute, and then quickly retreated. His mission to stay with Su Li had been completed, leading the spiritual horse that was fed more and more handsome. Su Li was stopped by a group of people as soon as she went out of the space of the spiritual realm. It was Feng Yuan and other 3 people. Without exception, they were surrounded by faint blood energy, which proved that more than 100 people died in their hands during this period. Su Li frowned slightly and reminded them, "Evil creatures are too strong. You should all go back to the Linli building to recuperate. It is the right way to eliminate the hostility." Feng Yuan nodded gently and stared at Su Li without blinking. He said, "Let's go back together." Su Li was slightly stunned when she heard the words. Before she responded, Chu Qingning suddenly laughed and said, "I also want to go back. Why don't we go back together and have a good meal?" Feng Yuan looked cold. When he was about to speak, Su Li's voice came in. "That's just right. I also have something to tell you." As soon as she said that, Feng Yuan had to swallow his words and silently followed Su Li. Yin Xuedong looked at Feng Yuan's depressed expression and laughed secretly. She stretched out her hand to pull Chu Qingning and said, "Then we have to find him out. Feng Mu, you go with us and help your eldest brother find one by the way. I also go." Chapter 294. In less than a quarter of an hour, Yin Xuedong and the other 2 returned with their horses. Su Li and Feng Yuan still maintained their original posture. It seemed that they didn't talk about anything. The 3 of them were all careful people. Even if they were curious about the relationship between them, they didn't say anything to make trouble. Under the leadership of Su Li, they immediately went back to Yunjing to Han. On the 3rd day after Su Li returned to Yunjing, a seemingly inconspicuous carriage appeared at the end of the pipeline outside Yinjing. It was very quiet in the carriage. Ling Ping sat and occasionally heard the coachman shout, but he didn't have the mood to listen to the outside world at the moment. His eyes were on Ling Li's pale and thin face. He kept looking at Ling Li. Ling Mo sat beside Ling Li and looked indifferent. His face was much paler than Ling Li's. He closed his eyes to heal his internal injuries. But from his frown from time to time, it could be seen that it was not so easy for him to heal his injuries. The management of the outer city of Yinjing was very loose. The carriage drove into the city without any inspection. Finally, it stopped in front of an inconspicuous courtyard of a private house. "Master, we're here." The coachman shouted and immediately lifted the curtain to let everyone get off. Ling Li scanned the courtyard with his psychic awareness and found no spies of other forces. He was relieved and said, "Second brother, let's go in." Then he pushed the wheelchair into the courtyard, and Ling Mo followed him. After the three of them settled in the courtyard, Ling Li finally breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Second brother, this courtyard is very safe. No one will disturb you if you stay here to heal. I'll go back to find Su Li and let her heal you." Although there were many questions in Ling Ping's mind, Ling Mo was seriously injured at the moment. It couldn't be delayed. He immediately nodded and watched Ling Li push the wheelchair away. Seeing that Ling Mo entered the room, he sat cross-legged and continued to stabilize his injury. Ling Ping walked around the yard and muttered, "This place is so secret and quiet. I can't see the spies of other forces in Yinjing City. Is it a secluded place arranged by Mr. Li?" Although his voice was very low, Ling Mo heard it clearly with his good hearing. He couldn't help but open his eyes and looked at Ling Ping with a slightly strange look. He never thought that the master would disguise himself as Mr. Li in order to hide his real identity. Mr. Li was also a young talent. His figure was very similar to the master. It was no pressure for the master to pretend to be him. He just showed his face in front of Ling Ping and then disappeared. Ling Ping immediately believed it. The secret arrangement along the way was naturally misunderstood by Ling Ping as Mr. Li's careful arrangement. Mr. Li has saved the Ling family many times. He has a gentle temperament. What you do will not offend him. Thinking of this, Ling Mo hid his thoughts and continued to stabilize his injury. At this moment, Ling Li just returned to the Ling mansion by carriage and was immediately scolded by Qiu Ming. "Where did you go this time? You actually didn't return home for 11 whole days. If it wasn't for a servant girl who couldn't stand it anymore, I would still be kept in the dark by you. How long has it been since they got married? How can you let Su Li stay alone? Since Su Li is with you, you can't let her down. Otherwise, I will be the first to punish you." After enduring the scolding for an hour, Ling Li was sweating profusely. As soon as he arrived at the east courtyard, he saw Ling Qinglan, who looked a bit strange. However, Ling Li was anxious to cure Ling Mo. He didn't think much about the chill behind his strange back. He asked directly, "Where is Su Li?" Ling Qinglan was stunned for a moment and said, "In the wing room. Ling Mo is seriously injured. I will take Su Li to see him. You go to my mother's side." Then, he directly turned the wheelchair to the wing room before Ling Qinglan agreed. Ling Qinglan's strange expression became obvious until Ling Qinglan went far away. It seems that Ling Li really didn't know that Su Li also disappeared in the days when he left. My original guess turned out to be wrong. Ling Qinglan pondered and hesitated. Since they were not in the same business, should he tell Ling Li about it? He suddenly remembered the time when Ling Li was sad. It seemed that there was only gray in his world and no color in his eyes. Well, Su Li probably felt bored and went back to her parents' home for a period of time. Ling Qinglan found a reason for himself. Now the relationship between them finally eased a little. He really didn't want to see Ling Li go back to the gloomy days. In the wing room, Su Li bowed her head to figure out the 8th hurdle of AO sword skills. Suddenly, she heard the sound of a wooden wheel turning. She raised her eyebrows slightly and put away the ancient book. She looked up and happened to meet Ling Li's slightly anxious eyes. Time seemed to be stagnant for a short time. Then, at a certain moment, they looked away at the same time. The atmosphere was slightly awkward, But soon, it was broken by Ling Li. Ling Mo is in the addendum in the outer city. He is seriously injured. Second brother is also there. Would you like to help me? Before Ling Li finished his words, he saw Su Li stand up and said without hesitation, "Let's go." "You?" Ling Li was shocked. Su Li looked slightly cold and explained, "The doctor's original intention is to save the dying and help the injured. It has nothing to do with you." "I see." Ling Li sighed bitterly in his heart. He shouldn't ask more. Ling Li and Su Li left the Ling mansion together. This matter naturally couldn't be hidden from Qiumeng. But under the explanation of Ling Qinglan, it became Ling Li's apology and went out to play with Su Li. Naturally, Qiumeng was very pleased and didn't ask more details. In the house in the outer city, Su Li's slender fingertips moved away from Ling Ping's wrist. She smiled warmly and said, "Second brother's fine. They are all superficial injuries. Although there are traces of internal injuries, the injuries are not serious. After many days of self-healing, he is almost recovered. I will give you a prescription. As long as second brother takes 3 portions every 3 days, according to the prescription, he will naturally recover within 1 month. You are really a miracle-working doctor. The miracle-working doctor really inherits Qi Xianqing's unique skill." Ling Ping couldn't help but praise when he heard the words. Then he quickly stepped aside and said in a somewhat urgent voice, "It's not too late. Sister-in-law, please work hard and let Ling Mo have a look." Su Li nodded slightly and gently put her fingers on Ling Mo's wrist. She sensed the condition of his body along the tendons and veins. She immediately frowned. Ling Li and Ling Ping were nervous at the same time and asked, "How is it?" Ling Mo was still as silent as usual, but he looked at Su Li with a little more inquiry and hope. Su Li pondered for a long time and said slowly, "It's very serious." Ling Li's heart thumped, and Ling Ping's face changed slightly. "How is it?" "Sister-in-law, Ling Mo was seriously injured because of me. Please cure him." Looking at Ling Mo's increasingly pale face, Su Li slightly pursed her lips and finally said, 50% of the tendons and veins in your body are broken. This is not a big deal. The most serious thing is that there have been 4 inborn forces raging in your body. These forces are entangled and exceed the limit that your genuine energy can bear now. They erode every inch of your flesh and blood. While you're constantly suppressing and stabilizing the injury, you should also suffer unimaginable pain, right? Maybe you can't even speak because of the pain. Ling Li's face finally changed. He suddenly turned to look at Ling Mo, but Ling Mo forced an ugly smile and squeezed out a sentence. "No, I can still speak." "Ling Mo, you..." Ling Ping was moved. He pointed at Ling Mo for a long time and didn't say a complete sentence. If what Su Li said was true, then in the past 10 days, Ling Mo, how did he endure it? Well, don't try to be brave anymore. Otherwise, even with your practice method, there will be a limit. Su Li's words were vague, and Ling Ping was confused. But Ling Li and Ling Mo instantly understood what she meant. The next moment, Ling Mo directly raised his head and fell straight to the ground, unconscious. Ling Mo was shocked and was about to rush over to check Ling Mo's situation. Su Li stopped him and said, "It's okay. He just relaxed his mind and fainted because of the pain. I will treat him next." "Second brother, you are also injured. Go and have a rest. It's enough for me to have Ling Li to help me." Ling Ping felt it was reasonable and nodded. Before leaving, he didn't forget to ask Ling Li to help Su Li well. Ling Li could only nod with a bitter smile. After Ling Ping left, Su Li's gentle expression instantly became cold. She said lightly, "The inborn force in his body can be suppressed and dispelled by your cultivation." "Of course." Ling Li nodded and pushed the wheelchair away. He walked over to help Ling Mo, who fainted. He pointed at Ling Mo's back. The genuine energy mixed with 10% of the star force immediately surged out. The 4 entangled inborn forces immediately fled like mice seeing a cat. But under the pressure of Ling Li, they were soon suppressed one by one. It was only a matter of time before they were dispelled. Seeing this, Su Li opened the needle box. She turned her palms over and over. Dense silver needles were inserted all over Ling Mo's body. Ling Li glanced at them and found that there were more than 900 needles. What kind of acupuncture was this? Ling Li was confused. His genuine energy was still in Ling Mo's body. So many needles were inserted, but he didn't find any change in Ling Mo's injury. Just when he wanted to say something, Su Li suddenly pointed at the tail of the silver needle in the center of Ling Mo's pubic region. As a touch of green light went into it, it seemed to have a chain reaction. All the silver needles began to rotate rapidly. Star force. Such pure star force. Ling Li kept recalling the scene just now. He had seen the green light on Su Li's fingertips many times before, but he was still in the inborn realm at that time. Now, he broke through to the longevity realm. He knew that the green light that Su Li used to heal people was actually the star force that could only be used in the longevity realm. It's impossible. In my perception, Li's cultivation is still in the peak of the inborn realm. It can't be fake. Maybe it's because of the inheritance. Ling Mo thought for a moment. Then his attention returned to Ling Mo's body. He was shocked to find that the tendons and vessels that were originally broken were magically connected by Su Li. The human body's tendons and vessels were so complicated. What's more, 70% of Ling Mo's tendons and vessels were in a mess just now. But Su Li only took less than 1 hour to cure the disease of a disabled person in the eyes of ordinary doctors. Even Qi Xianqing couldn't do it so efficiently and quickly. Chapter 295. After an hour, the treatment came to an end. Ling Mo's broken tendons and vessels were almost healed. The remaining wood star power was enough to repair all the tendons and vessels. After placing Ling Mo in the courtyard, Su Li walked out of the room and found that Ling Ping had come over and was talking to Ling Li. This time, Mr. Li helped us again. In addition to what happened in the hunting ground last time, our Ling family owes Mr. Li too much. Brother Li, although we may never be able to repay this kindness, we must keep it in mind. I originally suspected that it was he who secretly helped us on the battlefield these years. After this, I can be sure. Next to Shi Zhua, Ling Ping analyzed clearly. Ling Li looked serious and seemed to listen carefully. But from Su Li's perspective, she could see a trace of helplessness on his side face. Seeing this, Su Li smiled slightly. She came over and sat down. She called, "Second brother." Seeing her coming, Ling Ping immediately asked with concern, "Sister-in-law, thank you. How is Ling Mo?" Glancing at Ling Li, who was also concerned, Su Li pondered for a moment and slowly said, "His life is not in danger, and his tendons and vessels have all been connected. But to restore his original cultivation." Speaking of this, Su Li paused. Ling Ping suddenly changed his expression and exclaimed, "Cultivation can't be restored?" Ling Mo was only in his early 20s this year, but he had reached the peak of the inborn realm and could escape from 4 warriors of the same rank. In Ling Ping's opinion, he was a genius among geniuses. If Ling Mo lost his cultivation because of him, he was bound to feel guilty for the rest of his life. "Second brother, don't worry." Su Li's voice was soft, as if with a strange power. She soothed Ling Ping's irritation and continued, "It's not impossible to restore, but my medical skills are not good enough. I can only go to Tianji country to ask for advice from my master." "Yes, there is also Dr. Qi." Ling Ping suddenly understood and said with joy, "Sister-in-law, it's not too late. I will immediately send someone to escort you to Tianji country." Before Su Li responded, Ling Li, who had been sitting beside and listening, suddenly interrupted, "I will go too." "What are you going to do?" Ling Ping frowned slightly. "It's a long journey. You can't move freely. Don't make trouble for sister-in-law. Stay at home." Ling Li wanted to refute, but after thinking for a long time, he couldn't think of a suitable reason. Second brother is right. "Ling Li, you stay at home and keep an eye on Ling Mo. He will wake up soon. Don't let him fight with others before I come back." Su Li ordered. Ling Ping immediately smiled and said, "It's nothing. I will go back to the imperial court immediately. Ling Mo has no chance to fight. Don't worry." Su Li responded softly and then took a deep look at Ling Li. Ling Li sighed in his heart. He already understood what Su Li meant. Ling Mo, the head of the Shalu cult, existed not only for protection. This time, in addition to Ling Mo's accident, Ling Liui and other deputy heads of the Shalu cult died. 3 high-end fighters of the Shalu cult died at once. Ling Mo was an indispensable existence. Only Ling Mo could do some tasks. Now, Ling Mo couldn't fight, and there was no elder of the Yinma cult in Yinjing. He had to fight on behalf of Ling Mo. In this way, he naturally couldn't go to Tianji country with Su Li. Second brother, although you are back now, you don't know the news outside. If you send someone to escort me to Tianji country, it will be used against me. Su Li said again. Ling Ping was shocked when he heard it. He almost forgot about it. It was a big crime for the marshal to return to Yunjing without permission before the war was over. What about your safety, sister-in-law? Ling Ping hesitated and was in a dilemma. Su Li smiled and said, Second brother, don't forget that I am the daughter of a prince. I will ask my father to arrange a team of elites to escort me. In this way, no one dares to say anything. Ling Ping suddenly felt enlightened. He laughed and said, Yes, sister-in-law. Look at your second brother. He is too stupid. Then he glanced at Ling Li, who was lost in thought, and sighed. It's a great fortune for our Ling family that you can be the daughter-in-law of our Ling family. Second brother, don't say that. It's embarrassing. Su Li blushed and whispered shyly, I'll leave now. Gather people early. The sooner Ling Mo's injury is cured, the better. Then, she quickened her pace and left the small courtyard. Ling Ping smiled more and was about to say something to Ling Li. He looked at Ling Li and found that Ling Li looked at him in a strange way. It seemed to be jealousy. Ling Ping suddenly didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He smiled angrily and said, I didn't know that you were so narrow-minded. That is your beautiful wife. She just talked with your second brother. Why are you so jealous? Ling Li suddenly realized it. He restrained his mind and smiled embarrassedly. He felt bitter in his heart. He hoped that Su Li could also talk and laugh with him. He couldn't remember how many times he was treated coldly by Su Li in the past 6 months. Li has reached the peak of the inborn realm at the beginning of the year. Her cultivation is even better than that of Qi Xianqing. Her medical skills. Is she really going to Tianji country to seek medical skills? A thought flashed in Ling Li's mind, but he soon suppressed it at the bottom of his heart. There was no arrangement of the Yinma cult in Tianji country. Even if he thought more, he couldn't verify it. It was better not to think. After Su Li returned to the Ling mansion in the carriage arranged by the Yinma cult, she went back to the Lord Rui's mansion without stopping. Seeing Su Li, who hadn't come back for half a year, Dongfang Rui was very happy. He ordered people to prepare a table of Su Li's favorite dishes. In the past 6 months, I have collected a lot of precious herbs. They are all sent to the affiliated school for you. You can go and have a look when you are free. At the dinner table, Dongfang Rui said with a smile. Su Li's action of picking up the dishes stopped in the air for a long time. Finally, she picked up the dishes to Dongfang Rui stiffly. Dongfang Rui was stunned, and then he couldn't help showing a slight excitement in his eyes. This was the first time that Su Li picked up food for him. The first time, although Su Li recognized him as her father, Su Li's character was too strong and opinionated. Moreover, she was much more shrewd than him. Even if she cared about him very much, she wouldn't show it. For a long time, the relationship between Su Li and him was cold. They were not close. At least, Su Li couldn't lie on her father's knees like other children. Dongfang Rui couldn't even imagine that scene when he saw Su Li's calm face. But this time, Su Li's action made Dongfang Rui feel warm. He suddenly raised his head, but he didn't see Su Li's face. The girl on the opposite side was lowering her head and eating the food in the bowl. At the same time, a low and sweet voice sounded. Dad, if you think it's hard, you don't have to collect them. I seldom go to the affiliated school in the past 6 months. It's a waste to put them there. Dongfang Rui was shocked and shook his head like a rattle. It's not troublesome. I have nothing to do at ordinary times. It's quite interesting to collect herbs. I like it very much. Dongfang Rue said and grinned. He was very happy, since collecting herbs was effective for improving the relationship between father and daughter. How could he stop? Suli knew what Dongfang Rue was thinking. She felt a strange touch in her heart. She smiled unconsciously. Dad, it's good that you like it. Even if everything was fake, as Jing Xin said, the feeling she had at the moment couldn't be fake. At least for her, every feeling in the last period of her life was precious. After the meal, Suli didn't stay. She came to the affiliated school and took away the 10 guards of the Yunj sect who had been practicing. In the past half a year, she spared no effort to support them. Although the strength of the 10 guards was not as good as that of Fang Yuan and others, they reached the inborn 7th hurdle on average. They improved by 3 hurdles in half a year. It was almost a rocket. As for Yun Yi, the captain of the 10 guards, he reached the early stage of the inborn 9th hurdle with the help of Su Li's Wudao stone. He was only a little weaker than Fang Yuan. After Yun Yi sent the message, Su Li and others in the Linli building almost set off at the same time. They met in the ruined temple outside the city at night and changed the road together. Naturally, there were many spies in Yunjing City following them. But Su Li and her team of more than 10 people were sensitive. They soon got rid of all surveillance and went straight to Tianji country. Although Tianji country was adjacent to Dahan country, Yunjing City itself was closer to Nanjiang country. Therefore, Su Li and others set off from Yunjing City, and the journey was very long. Although they had the help of the spiritual horse, it took them half a month to reach the capital of Tianji country. Tantai City. On the spacious street with heavy traffic, the shouts were endless. All kinds of machine-operated vehicles passed by everywhere. Almost every family in the roadside shops used the machine-operated skills. All kinds of delicate mechanisms made Chu Qingning enjoy them. Tianji country deserves its reputation. These things are too delicate. Chu Qingning led the horse and looked at it while walking. He was amazed. When the others heard Chu Qingning's words, they rarely showed approval. This group of more than a dozen travel-worn people was Su Li's team. Su Li glanced at the dim light in the sky and said, "It's late. Let's find a place to stay first and then talk about other things." Miss, the Tianji Inn is the best inn in Tianji country. It is said that except for people, everything in it is related to the machine-operated skills. It is very unique. Therefore, the accommodation fee is very high. It is said that it can reach 1,000 taels per night. Yun Yi pointed to the tallest wooden building in the distance and said, obviously, he knew the situation of Tianji country. Su Li nodded and said, "Let's go there." The drinks of the Linli building were popular in the north. Now her money had already become a pile of numbers, which could not be used up. The Tianji Inn was the face of Tantai City. When Su Li and others stepped into the door, they didn't say anything. A very clever waiter ran to them with a very natural smile on his face. "Miss, do you want to have a meal or stay here? Our inn not only has exquisite rooms, but also excellent food." Our Miss, Yun Yi stepped forward. Before he had time to answer, he suddenly heard an extremely sharp voice behind him. The voice was so coquettish that Chu Qingning got goosebumps just by listening to it. Chapter 296. The Tianji Inn was the pride of the people in Tantai City. Therefore, when someone criticized the inn, many guests who were eating in the inn immediately raised their heads angrily and looked toward the direction of the voice. With a single glance, many people who wanted to reprimand him immediately gave up. Even the noise in the hall became much quieter. Instead, it was replaced by endless whispers. It turns out to be her. No wonder. Since the Tianji Inn was given to the 4th prince by His Majesty, tut-tut. While they were talking, Su Li had settled the account. Then she turned her head, and her indifferent eyes fell on the woman with heavy makeup, who was very fancy. The woman looked about 30 years old, and her appearance was very ordinary. Coupled with the greasy makeup, she was even more annoying. However, judging from the jewelry on her head, she should be from a wealthy family. Moreover, Su Li glanced at the faint fear of the guests in the inn, and she had a vague guess in her heart. At this time, the woman with heavy makeup saw Su Li's delicate and small face and a touch of jealousy appeared in her eyes. She immediately sneered and scolded. "Hey, where does this little vixen come from? Aren't you afraid that you can't stand so many men when you go out?" As soon as the words came out, Fang Yuan's face instantly became cold. His palm touched the hilt of the sword. When he was about to take action, he was stopped by a small movement of Su Li. However, Su Li stopped Fang Yuan, but failed to stop Chu Qingning's mouth. Seeing that the woman insulted Su Li, Chu Qingning was immediately angry. He pointed at the nose of the woman with heavy makeup and scolded, "Where does this ugly woman come from? Not only does she have a donkey face, but her mouth is also so stinky. You should see clearly that this is the Tianji Inn, a place to eat. If you can't help but want to spit shit, go to the latrine quickly. Don't be disgusting." Chu Qingning was so eloquent that the woman with heavy makeup didn't have a chance to interrupt his smooth scolding. When she came to her sense and understood the meaning of Chu Qingning's words, she was so angry that her face turned green. You, how dare you? Do you know who I am? How dare you talk to me like this?" Seeing that the woman with heavy makeup was so angry that she couldn't speak clearly, many people in the inn secretly held back their laughter and felt very happy. At the same time, they cast a pitiful look at Su Li and others. This round of scolding was satisfying, but this woman was not easy to deal with. The group of young people was going to be out of luck. "How would I know who you are? There's nothing written on your face." Chu Qingning rolled his eyes and had no scruples. It was Su Li who stood behind him. He didn't need to be afraid of a nobody. After the incident of Nanjiang country, Su Li's strength had risen to the level of a sect or even a country. For example, an elephant could trample dozens of ants to death casually. How could it be interested in understanding what ants were thinking? You. The woman with heavy makeup trembled and her pretty face was pale. She pointed at Chu Qingning, who was busy and didn't say a complete sentence. "Ah." She stamped her feet and screamed. He cursed angrily. "You bunch of trash. What are you waiting for? Capture him. I want him to know the price of offending me." Although the guards behind her didn't like the woman's orders, they still acted because of the orders from above. This action immediately shocked all the people in the inn who were watching the fun. Inborn realm. These guards turned out to be all strong practitioners of the inborn realm. No wonder the woman with heavy makeup was so confident. "Surrender, and I can make the decision to let you suffer less," the leading middle-aged guard said coldly, and his big palm containing the inborn genuine energy shrouded Su Li. He was experienced and could naturally see that the person in charge of this group was the girl of 16 or 17. But before this palm hit, a strong wind suddenly shot out from the second floor of the inn and forcibly dispersed the middle-aged guard's force. Sensing the extremely condensed, genuine energy in the strong wind, the middle-aged guard's face changed slightly. He didn't dare to attack Su Li again and turned back to withdraw from the door of the inn. The other guard were not so lucky. They were hit by the strong wind and flew out of the door with a scream. Bang! The woman with heavy makeup didn't know what happened. Suddenly, a bright red palm print was thrown on her face. She was directly thrown to the ground. Immediately, half of her face swelled up at a speed visible to the naked eye. Who hit me? After being slapped in front of so many people, the woman with heavy makeup was stunned for a moment, and then she let out an extremely shrill howl. But before she could make a scene, a cold voice in her ear instantly woke her up, and she felt cold all over. "You can't be seen in public. Get out of here." This voice was so familiar. It was that princess. Why was she here? The woman with heavy makeup was full of fear and no longer arrogant. She knelt down with a plop and kept kowtowing. "I know I'm wrong. I'll get out now. As she said, she gritted her teeth and actually hugged her legs and rolled out of the inn. She left with the guards of the inborn realm, as if there were ghosts chasing behind them. This series of changes happened in a very short time. The incident was over before everyone had time to react. Then, a shopkeeper who looked like a scholar suddenly came down from upstairs and stood in front of Su Li. He said respectfully, This, princess. The two princes upstairs invite you to have a chat." Su Li's eyes flashed, and she immediately chuckled. "Please lead the way." The shopkeeper was immediately flattered and said, "Not at all. Your Highness, this way, please." Someone in the lobby recognized the shopkeeper and immediately exclaimed in a low voice. It turned out that the shopkeeper also had a great background. No wonder he was not afraid of Ilu Ome. Second floor, Tianzi private room. Suli pushed the door and walked in with Fang Yuan. As for others, they were waiting outside. Although the private room was large, it would leave a bad impression on the people inside if they went in together. Passing through the empty hall, Suli lifted the silk curtain and came to the stairs on the second floor. Finally, she saw two people sitting on both sides of the round mahogany table, a man and a woman. The man was Tan Tai Yu, while the woman was unfamiliar. Her facial features were somewhat similar to Tan Tai Yu's. Her every move exuded elegance. "Junior sister apprentice, it's really you." Seeing Suli coming in, Tan Tai Yu was surprised and said, "Just now on the first floor, I couldn't see you clearly. I thought I was wrong." The woman looked at Suli with interest and didn't speak. Suli smiled sweetly and said, "I haven't seen you for a long time. You are more elegant than before. You are the last apprentice of my master. Don't make fun of me." Although Tan Tai Yu said so, the more brilliant smile on his face revealed his inner thoughts. Fang Yuan saw that they were not hostile. After glancing at Tan Tai Yu, he left silently and stood outside the silk curtain like the most loyal guard. When Tan Tai Yu saw Fang Yuan's action, a touch of appreciation flashed in his eyes. Then he pulled Su Li to sit down and said with a smile, "I almost forgot to introduce you. This is my half-sister, Tan Tai Mingwe. She is the second eldest in the family. She saved you just now. Otherwise, you would be in danger. Although you brought a lot of people, in front of a warrior of the inborn realm, more people won't be an advantage." Su Li smiled slightly and didn't explain. She said to the elegant woman, "Thank you for saving me, second princess." Tan Tai Mingwe smiled and said with a smile in her eyes, "Fourth brother, you are wrong. Even if I don't help you, your little junior sister apprentice will be fine. The cultivation of the one who spoke arrogantly just now is not lower than mine." Tan Tai Mingwe said and looked at Fang Yuan, who stood outside the curtain with only a silhouette. This person could follow Su Li in, but the one who exposed his cultivation could only stand outside the door. This alone was enough to expose a lot of information. Before Chu Qingming revealed his pneuma, he was no different from the guards around Su Li who exposed their cultivation at the late stage. Tan Tai Mingwe also thought that Su Li couldn't deal with Ilu Ome, so she took action. But now, when Tan Tai Mingwe thought of the team of more than a dozen people, she couldn't help but be shocked. She couldn't help but have a ridiculous idea. Tan Tai Yu was slightly shocked when he heard it. The second sister's cultivation was the highest among the descendants of the royal family. She reached the inborn 8th hurdle. The guards around Su Li could reach that level. Even if Dongfang Rue was powerful, it was impossible to win over such a young warrior of the late stage of the inborn realm. "Junior sister apprentice," Tan Tai Yu hesitated and said. Su Li smiled and nodded slightly. "Second princess, you really have good eye." Tan Tai Yu immediately didn't dare to speak. He also thought the same as Tan Tai Mingwe, and Su Li didn't seem to deny it. "By the way, senior fellow apprentice, is Master still here? I have some important things to tell him." Su Li changed the topic, and the stagnant atmosphere in the room immediately relaxed. Tan Tai Yu is also one of the best princes in the royal family. He calmed down quickly and said with a smile, "Of course, but Master lives in the lonely mountain outside the city. It is very remote. If you find him by yourself, I am afraid that it will take a lot of time. I will take you there." Su Li nodded and said, "Thank you, senior fellow apprentice. Don't mention it." Tan Tai Yu shook his head and smiled. "You still regard me as an outsider as before, but it's good. I am in an awkward situation now. If you live in the prince's mansion, there will be trouble. You can stay in Tianji Inn. It is my property now. It doesn't matter how long you live." "Okay," Su Li responded and turned away. She didn't ask more about the so-called awkward situation. After she left, Tan Tai Mingwe took a sip of wine and said, "Why don't you ask her for help? I can see that although this woman is not close to you, you are from the same sect after all. If the power in her hand can be used by you, Your current predicament is nothing at all. Tantayu smiled bitterly. Second sister, things are not as simple as you think. I don't want junior sister apprentice to get involved in this mess. Then you are willing to let me get involved in this mess? Tantai Mingwei rolled her eyes. Tantayu quickly apologized and toasted, which made her giggle. Well, you're my dearest brother. Come on, drink with me again, and then you go to accompany your junior sister apprentice. Bang! There was a clear sound of wine glasses touching. Tantai Mingwei smiled, and her eyes were meaningful. Silly brother. Although Su Li looked simple as a woman, she could feel that this woman was absolutely not simple. Chapter 297. Soon after Su Li left the room, Tantayu followed her with people. As a prince of a country, although he was not the first crown prince, his status was still respected. There were many guards of the inborn realm following him. Even if none of them reached the inborn fifth hurdle, the young warriors of the inborn realm could follow them, which proved that they had potential. Tantayu glanced at the large group of people behind Su Li and hesitated. Junior sister apprentice, the machine-operated dragon vehicle is not big. With so many people, I'm afraid. Su Li smiled and motioned him to be calm. She whispered in Fang Yuan's ear. Then Chu Qingning and others immediately left with the waiter, leaving only Fang Yuan and Yun Yi. Tantayu breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, It's much more convenient. Junior sister apprentice, don't worry. I will take care of your safety here. I will never let you get hurt. Su Li nodded with a sweet smile and nodded obediently. Of course, I believe you. Okay. Tantayu laughed heartily, and then took Su Li and others to the machine-operated dragon vehicle. It was a machine-operated beast with a height of 1.5 people, 3 meters long and 1 meter wide. The whole surface was covered with cyan scales, and a pair of dragon eyes were bright as if it were a living creature. Seeing such a majestic vehicle, Yin Yi, who was behind Su Li, couldn't help but exclaim, Is this the machine-operated dragon vehicle behind you? Yes. Tantayu was always modest and polite, showing a little pride on his face. This is one of the symbols of Tianji. Only when you come to Tantai City in person and are received by the royal family can you see it. At the moment of talking, everyone had already boarded the machine-operated dragon vehicle. The dragon vehicle made a low roar and went out of the city with a beautiful arc like a swimming dragon. In this season, Tantai City was very hot. Many ice cages were placed in the dragon vehicle, which was quiet and cool. Through the glass mirror of the dragon vehicle, Su Li could clearly see the bustling scene outside the city. She had never been to Tianji City in the previous life. Now she saw such a magical, machine-operated dragon vehicle for the first time. She couldn't help but be slightly surprised and sighed. Senior fellow apprentice, the dragon vehicle is really extraordinary. It is much more comfortable than the carriage. It would be good if such a vehicle could be introduced into Dahan country. Tantayu shook his head helplessly and said with a smile, Junior sister apprentice, you are not the only one who has this idea. Everyone who comes to Tianji country will have the same idea. Even we often imagine the interests represented by the machine-operated dragon carriage. But the manufacturing method of the machine-operated dragon carriage is the top secret of our royal family. Only Father knows it. And I don't know why Father forbids the machine-operated dragon carriage to enter other countries. I see. When Su Li nodded, her psychic awareness had quietly invaded the core of the dragon carriage. In her opinion, it was easy for any practitioner of the longevity realm to figure out the structure of the dragon carriage. But after so many years, why had no one spread the manufacturing method of the dragon carriage? After all, the resources represented by the dragon carriage were not a little bit. Even a practitioner in the longevity realm would be tempted. Only with enough resources could a practitioner cultivate faster. This was an unchanging truth since ancient times. When she reached the longevity realm, her psychic awareness had been transformed. Even the special materials that could weaken psychic awareness could not stop Su Li's exploration. In just a few seconds, Su Li's psychic awareness penetrated into the core structure of the hearse. All of a sudden, her eyes slightly narrowed, and her spiritual sense abruptly stopped. It's really weird. The last key place in the core structure was covered with a layer of faint gray fog. The power contained in the gray fog was not strong. If she broke through forcibly, the gray fog could not stop her. But just the thought of breaking through the gray fog in her heart made her feel uneasy. It seemed that as long as she broke through, something extremely bad would happen. After hesitating for a while, Su Li's psychic awareness circled around the gray fog and finally slowly withdrew. I can't afford to delay my current affairs. There is no need to make trouble. Her eyes flashed, and the idea of exploration immediately faded. On one side, Tantaiyu was busy introducing the customs of Tianji country to Su Li, and he did not notice her abnormality. Lonely Mountain was far from Tantai City. The dragon carriage traveled for half a day. It didn't arrive at the foot of Lonely Mountain until the evening. Tantaiyu took Su Li to a bamboo house built by the water in the mountain, but he didn't see Qi Xianqing. Did the master go fishing? Tantaiyu looked around, but he didn't see anyone. He couldn't help but wonder. I think the master has left here. Su Li wiped the table with her fingertips and immediately drew a clear line. The table has accumulated dust. I'm afraid that the master has left for more than a month. Tantaiyu's heart sank. A month ago, it was the time when he took over Tianji Yin. He was so busy. He didn't expect that the master had left silently. He frowned. Junior sister apprentice, you came to ask the master for help. What should we do? Seeing the apology between Tantaiyu's eyebrows, Su Li shook her head and said, It doesn't matter. The master left suddenly. It's not your fault. I will find another way. Tantaiyu was silent. He saw that Su Li was not happy, but he felt that the junior sister apprentice must be very disappointed in her heart, but she didn't show it. Thinking of a relationship between the junior sister apprentice and himself, he hesitated for a moment, gritted his teeth, and said, Junior sister apprentice, I will take you to father. He must know where the master is. When she said that, Tantaiyu felt a trace of regret in his heart, but it was soon replaced by firmness. Su Li was slightly stunned and immediately reacted. She glanced at Fang Yuan and Yun Yi. The latter immediately understood and retreated. Until they couldn't hear Su Li and Tantaiyu's conversation, Yun Yi couldn't help but worry. What should we do? The miracle-working Dr. Qi is not here. It's hard for the mist to explain when she goes back. Fang Yuan smiled and said lightly, Now, do you still think that Su Li came here to treat Ling Mo? Yun Yi was shocked and said, Isn't it? Fang Yuan looked at the two people who were talking in the mountain and said slowly, Her medical skills have long surpassed Qi Xianqing's. Among all the people, he was the first to follow Su Li, and only he knew some secrets. For example, in the early years, Su Li was good at poison, but Qi Xianqing knew nothing about it. Su Li's medical skills were not taught by Qi Xianqing. Yin Yi understood the implied meaning of Fang Yuan's words. He was shocked and lost the ability to speak for a while. When Fang Yuan was still guessing the real purpose of Su Li's coming to Tianji country, Tantaiyu told a secret of the imperial palace that even the ministers of Tianji country didn't know. In fact, father has been worried about my mother's strange disease over the years. When talking about his mother, Tantaiyu's eyes showed sadness. It turned out that Tantaiyu's mother, concubine Yin, was the most favored concubine of Emperor Tantai Feng of Tianji country. The empress was just a commodity sent by the ministers to stabilize the national conditions. If it weren't for considering the face of the imperial palace, Tantai Feng didn't even bother to go to the empress's bedchamber and stayed in concubine Yin's palace at other times. Therefore, as the children of concubine Yin, he and the second princess Tantai Mingyue were favored by Tantai Feng. Later, concubine Yin contracted a strange disease and had been in a coma. Tantai Feng was abnormal and forbade any imperial doctor who treated concubine Yin to leak the news. Otherwise, he would be executed. Later, he secretly looked for famous doctors in the secular world and the martial arts circle to treat concubine Yin secretly. But after so many years, concubine Yin still didn't wake up. If it weren't because she was still breathing, Tantaiyu would think that his mother was dead. However, it was a little strange that for more than 10 years, Tantai Feng was getting older, but concubine Yin still maintained her young appearance. It seemed that time couldn't leave any trace on her. Now my identity is sensitive, so it's not easy to enter the imperial palace. But if I follow the secret line of father, I will definitely not be found by other princes. I think with my identity, I will be scolded by father at most. Tantai pretended to be relaxed and said. Then he seemed to think of something. He didn't give Suli a chance to refuse and quickly said, "It's not too late. Before my whereabouts are exposed to eldest brother, I will take you into the imperial palace." Seeing that he said so, Suli could only swallow her refusal and nodded. "Thank you, senior fellow apprentice." She could easily cure Ling Mo's injury, but in order to come to Tinji country, she specially left an excuse so that Ling Mo's meridians would not be hindered in a month. The ultimate goal of her coming to Tinji country was to deal with Tinji country as she did with Nanjiang country within a month. But now, with the help of Tantai, the time was immediately shortened by countless times. And according to Tantai's words, Tantai Feng seemed to be a good father, which made her have other ideas. Maybe I don't need to use the spiritual realm this time. Thinking of this, Tantai had returned home with everyone and rushed to the imperial palace overnight. The imperial palace's gate wall was vermilion, but one place was really dark. There were countless inborn seniors guarding around it. As soon as Tantai's dragon carriage stopped, he received a lot of attention. After perceiving the pneuma of Su Li and Feng Yuan, the hidden eyes immediately became sharp. Tantai got off the dragon carriage and walked quickly to the gate of the courtyard with a serious face. He whispered, "Junior sister apprentice is the last disciple of the master. Now she is better than the master. I bring her here, so I have some confidence." After this sentence, the gate did not respond. Tantai frowned and could only say again, "Mammy, please make an exception. I can't hurt my mother." After this sentence, Suli heard the breath in the door paused, and then, after the sound of the door bolt being pulled, the courtyard gate finally opened, and an old woman with a wrinkled face came out. She glanced at Su Li and others, and a trace of anger flashed in her turbid eyes, but she didn't lose her temper. She glanced at Tantai coldly, and the old voice sounded in his ear. "You take care of yourself." Tantai stopped breathing, nodded slightly, and quickly took Su Li into the courtyard. Just at the moment when they stepped into the courtyard, another dragon carriage galloped over. Before the dragon carriage stopped, Tantai Mingwei got off. Seeing that the courtyard gate had been slowly closed, the eagerness on her face immediately became extremely ugly. Chapter 298. When Tantai Mingwei was upset, a mighty general in black scale armor approached and asked in a deep voice, "Second princess, are you also here for the young female doctor?" When Tantai Mingwei saw him, a strange expression flashed across her brows, and she exclaimed, "Commander Su, why are you here?" Commander Su was silent for a moment and said, "Second princess, you are wrong. We have been guarding the queen all the time and never slacked off." Tantai Mingwei was completely surprised because Commander Su was not an ordinary commander of the Imperial Army, but the most elite underground force of her father. He was also the foundation of the Tantai family, the Black Scale Army. But now, Commander Su, who was supposed to protect the stability of the country, had been guarding her mother for more than 10 years. Didn't it mean that it was not the Empress, but the Queen who was the mistress of the Tantai family? There was a trace of warmth in Tantai Mingyue's eyes. Although she knew that her father loved her mother deeply and sought medical treatment for her for more than 10 years, she did not expect that her father's affection for her mother could reach such a level. "Second princess, our duties are top secret. It is enough for only you, even your brother, to know this matter." As Commander Su spoke, he looked toward the courtyard doors that were still closed. His eyes turned cold. If I had met the fourth prince in the past, then perhaps I might have considered it. But now, if it weren't for the fact that he is the queen's own son, then his actions today are enough reason for me to act. Commander Su smiled coldly. Tantayu's purpose was obvious. He clearly used this line to let the girl enter the palace secretly. Tantayu's talent was far less than Tantai Mingyue's. He was more partial to Tantai Mingyue. Now he saw Tantayu's selfishness, which made him even more unhappy. Tantai Mingyue saw that Commander Su was so explicit, and her face was unnatural for a moment. After all, Tantayu was her closest brother. So, even if she was very unhappy with Su Li, she could only help her at this moment. Commander Su, you've misunderstood me. Su Li is not ignorant and incompetent, but the last disciple of the miracle-working Dr. Qi. Her talent in the medical circle has been extraordinary since she was a child. Now many years have passed. Maybe she can surpass her master. My mother has been in a coma for so many years. I am afraid that my brother is anxious, so Dantai Mingyue's words were reasonable and well-founded. Finally, the coldness on Commander Su's face eased a little. He said slowly, "Since second princess said so, I will believe fourth prince this time." "Thank you, Commander Su." "Second princess, you're too polite." After exchanging some pleasantries, Tantai Mingyue glanced at the silent door. Her eyes flashed with helplessness, and then she walked away. If there was no sufficient reason, even she could not enter from this door. She wanted to stop them before Tantayu entered, but it was a pity that she was one step late. At this moment, in the black-walled courtyard, Su Li followed Tantayu alone and passed through heavy guards. Finally, they came to a bedchamber that exuded a faint fragrance of medicine. Fang Yuan and Yunshun were stopped when they passed through heavy guards. "This is the place where my mother rests. Go in. Anyway, you have to pretend. Then I will take you to see my father." Tantayu transmitted the sound secretly. Su Li nodded gently. Without hesitation, she lifted the gauze curtain and stepped into the inner bedchamber. When a maid in the palace saw Su Li coming in alone, she couldn't help but look surprised. But she was obviously well-trained and didn't make any radical moves. She walked to Su Li with light steps and saluted. "Doctor, you have 2 hours for diagnosis and treatment. After that, I will clean the body of Her Highness." Su Li said softly, "You can leave. I can't allow outsiders to disturb my treatment." The maid saluted and left the inner hall without staying. In the past years, various miracle-working doctors who came to treat Her Highness made similar requests. She had long been used to it. After the maid left, the inner hall was completely quiet. Only the breeze through the window blew in the ears from time to time, making a slight sound. In the center of the inner hall, on the luxurious soft gauze bed, a woman in palace dress who looked no more than 27 or 28 years old was sleeping quietly. According to the calculation, concubine Yin was over 40 years old. Time really didn't leave any trace. Is it possible that she accidentally ate some youth-retaining spiritual fruit and fell asleep? Thinking of this, Su Li walked to the bed and gently put her fingertips on concubine Yin's wrist. In an instant, a strange feeling rose from the bottom of her heart. Su Li just closed her eyes and suddenly opened them. She was shocked. Clear. Unprecedentedly clear. She could actually sense all the changes in concubine Yin's body, from the bones to the tendons, and even the sound of the blood flowing in the blood vessels. As long as she wanted to hear it, the sound would be immediately magnified. Why is it like this? I have recovered a lot of memory, but I have never seen her. Su Li was shocked and silent. As she thought, her perception had reached the awareness sea of concubine Yin. It was a boundless gray. A sense of oppression was transmitted into Su Li's body along the perception of her psychic awareness, which immediately made her feel unprecedented pressure. The power of suppression. Su Li's eyes were confused for a moment, and suddenly said a word that she didn't understand. When this word came out of her mouth, she suddenly woke up and then frowned tightly. Her mind was in a mess. The power of suppression? It was strange and familiar. It was strange because she didn't have any joy about it in her memory, but familiar. Su Li guessed that it was mostly the memory brought by the illusion. Did that secret method let me inherit a trace of the memory of reincarnation mirror? Su Li's thoughts turned quickly. and she quickly figured out a lot of doubts. Then she looked at concubine Een in a different way. Suppression. What kind of existence needed the suppression of reincarnation mirror? The answer seemed to be obvious. Su Li's heartbeat suddenly accelerated. Looking at the beautiful woman who breathed evenly and quietly on the bed, she was about to confirm her thoughts. Suddenly, a low and deep voice came from the hall. Outsider, you are right. Gu is not a native creature of the illusion. Who? The voice came so suddenly that it sounded in Su Li's ears. Su Li's pupils suddenly contracted, and she turned around abruptly. Suddenly, she saw a middle-aged man in a yellow robe with an unshaven beard standing not far behind her. Looking at the outline of his face, it was not difficult to see that he must have been an extremely handsome man when he was young. Su Li saw the golden dragon embroidered on the yellow robe, and her eyes were slightly gloomy. After a moment of silence, she said, Tantai Feng. The middle-aged man laughed when he heard the words. In this life, you are the first one who dares to call my name directly. However, as the half-owner of Reincarnation Mirror, you are qualified. Su Li's eyes were gloomy, and she laughed at herself. What kind of owner am I? Senior Tantai, don't laugh at me. At this time, you know to call me Senior. It seems that you have guessed my identity. Did Jing Xian tell you that? The middle-aged man revealed a lot of secrets, which made Su Li more sure of his identity. She immediately nodded and said, If I guessed right, you are one of the ancient existences in the illusion like the old ancestor of Shaoshan Palace. Shaoshan Palace? When Tantai Feng heard these 3 words, he was stunned. He seemed to think of someone, and said with a faint smile, That old thing dares to call himself a god? He really dares to say that. Su Li's heart moved when she heard the words of Tantai Feng. It seemed that he was very disdainful of the old ancestor of Shaoshan Palace. Little girl, your situation seems to be very bad now, and it seems that you are coming for me. Why don't we make a deal? Su Li raised her eyebrows and said respectfully, I'd like to hear the details. Tantai Feng laughed, waved his hand to get 2 chairs, and asked Su Li to sit down. His eyes fell on concubine Een, and a touch of affection flashed on his face. Use your authority as the half-owner to let my cultivation companion not be suppressed by the illusion. At least she can live normally in the illusion. I will agree to any request you have. When Su Li heard the words, she immediately weighed in her mind. When she just checked, she had already found that if she used the secret method to wake up concubine Een, it was just a matter of thinking, and the consumption of foundation was far less than fighting with others. However, since she saw an ancient existence, her mind immediately became active, and she was no longer satisfied with the previous goal. After thinking for a moment, Su Li raised her head and looked directly at Tantai Feng. Senior, I agree to your request, and I want you to help me once when it is necessary. Tantai Feng's face darkened when he heard the words, and his smile faded a lot. Little girl, do you really not know the price of us fighting in the illusion? Or are you sent by that old guy, Mirror Spirit, to show off? With the change of Tantai Feng's mood, Su Li immediately felt a pressure. In her special state now, she actually sensed a trace of deep hatred from it. Chaotic thoughts flashed through her mind, and Su Li felt more and more suffocating pressure. She had to stop thinking and braced herself to say, Senior, I don't understand what you mean. Isn't Mirror Spirit Jing Xian? You said she is a little girl, but why do you say she is an old guy? It seems that you really don't understand. Tantai Feng restrained a trace of breath and time, took a deep look at Su Li, and said, Yes, you are just a remnant soul that is about to die. I'm afraid that the old guy doesn't even want to see you. Remnant soul. Su Li was silent. Yes, she couldn't return to the real world now, and she would dissipate at a certain moment. This was the soul with a trace of memory. But even so, she still wanted to find out what secrets were hidden in the reincarnation mirror. Tantai Feng saw this and couldn't help laughing. He finally put away the last trace of temptation and sighed. Little girl, if the little girl Jing Xian is the real mirror spirit, how can she suppress so many ancient existences? She is just the agent chosen by the real mirror spirit on a whim. Su Li was shocked and blurted out, "If the real mirror spirit loses interest, what will she do?" Chapter 299. What answered Tantai phone was silence. After the silence, a free and easy smile appeared on the girl's face. She said indifferently, "Since the outcome has been doomed, why should I waste time on myself? What I think now is just that they can have a better future." Looking at the girl in front of him, who was many years younger than him, showing calmness in the face of life and death, even Tantai phone, who had lived for many years, couldn't help but show a stunned look. Then, a rare admiration appeared on his face, and he sighed. "If you don't die, you will definitely be one of the leaders of this generation of Qingshui's circle. It's a pity that you ran into this monster." Tantai phone didn't continue. Even if he had been impressed by Su Li in his heart, what was the use of saying more to a person who had no future? Su Li was silent. Was Qingshui circle the name of the real world outside? In the memory of the outside world, she only knew Juzhou region. In her opinion, Juzhou region had more than 20 major cultivation sects and countless secular countries. It was already boundless. How big was Qingshui's circle? It must be the boundless beauty of mountains and rivers. Unfortunately, she had no chance to see it again. Sighing secretly, Su Li restrained her lost mood and looked up, saying, "Senior, I agree to the deal you said. I only have one request. Can you lend me the power of Tianji country for 10 years? She didn't mention the matter of letting Tantai phone take action. Although it was only a short contact, she had already understood that Tantai phone was not a very difficult person to talk to. But her request just made him change his face, so the price of taking action must be unbearable for him. Although Tantai phone tried his best to suppress it, she still sensed the suppression force that was more powerful than that of concubine Yin. Once she took action, it would lead to the backlash of the suppression force. Su Li guessed that Tantai phone was likely to sleep forever like Inge. Sure enough, when Tantai phone heard that Su Li changed her request, he smiled without thinking. "It's easy. Just take it. It doesn't matter if it's 10 or 20 years. It's not too late to take it back when you leave me." Tianji country was just a force he created for concubine Yin in order to comply with the rules of the illusion. Now Su Li could reduce the suppression force on Yingu, so Tianji country was naturally useless to him. After reaching an agreement, Su Li didn't hesitate and immediately took action. The process of dispelling the suppression force was very simple. In just 10 minutes, concubine Yin's pale face became ruddy at a speed visible to the naked eye. But it seemed that there was still some time before she woke up. Tantai phone saw this change, and a faint excitement appeared in his eyes. Enough. Although the suppression force was only reduced by 20%, Ji's strength is enough to resist the remaining 80%. Hearing this, Su Li finally breathed a sigh of relief. In this way, the matter of Tianji country was solved without bloodshed. After the excitement, Tantai phone quickly regained his composure. At his realm, unless it was something that truly made him ecstatic, he would rarely show his emotions on his face. "Su girl, I will lend you the power of Tianji country. But in order not to let the mirror spirit notice the strangeness, I will let you take over the throne and then give him some instructions. What do you think? Chen Shun, I will lend you the power of Tianji country. But in order not to let the mirror spirit notice the strangeness, I will let you take over the throne and then give some instructions to him. What do you think?" Su Li nodded slightly and agreed. "Senior, you are considerate. I have no objection. But when you give instructions to senior fellow apprentice you, can you help to hide it and let him lend his power to the leanly building for the time being? However, since you asked me to do so, I will do it. Speaking of which, I have the idea of making Tantai you the crown prince. Your appearance saves me the time of hesitation." Su Li was slightly stunned when she heard the words. She thought for a moment and asked, "Because of Master Qi Xianqing?" Tantai Feng shook his head. "On the contrary, if it weren't for Qi Xianqing, I wouldn't have to hesitate. Speaking of this, Tantai Feng's slightly sharp eyes swept over Su Li. In the latter's doubt, he slowly said, "Girl, this deal is fair for you, but for me, it is a bargain. I never owe anyone a favor in my life, so I advise you not to have anything to do with the people of Ghost Clan. Otherwise, the result will be more serious than death." Ghost Clan? Su Li frowned. Perhaps it was because the existence of Tantai Feng was too old. Every word he said contained a lot of information. She hadn't digested it, but a ghost clan that she had never heard of was involved. Ghost Clan. It is the evilest clan in the world and is hated by everyone in Qingshui's circle. They seem to be no different from the human clan, but each ghost clan has a very terrible special ability. As long as they grow up, even the supreme master of a circle can't do anything to them. Tantai Feng seemed to be lost in memory. He looked very serious, and then he said something shocking. "Qi Xianqing, he is a ghost clan?" Su Li was slightly shocked, and she couldn't believe it. How could? Thinking of the contact with Qi Xianqing in this life, she didn't think that an old man at the peak of the inborn realm would be a formidable ghost clan in Tantai Feng's words. You don't need to panic too much. Qi Xianqing is just a lost ghost clan. He has been suppressed by the reincarnation mirror for too long, and his power is almost all lost. He has long forgotten who he is and how to use the talent of Ghost Clan. Now he only has an obsession. What obsession? In Su Li's mind, Qi Xianqing's tired face of running around constantly these years, and there was a strange emotion in her heart. For revival, Tantai Feng's expression was complicated. Although they were enemies, he couldn't help but feel sad for Qi Xianqing's death. "I have personally investigated the Ghost Valley, and it has no connection with the Ghost Clan. Qi Xianqing has long forgotten what he wants to revive. Now he runs around for the Ghost Valley just because there's a word ghost in it." Su Li was silent, and a sense of relief rose in her heart. Although she had more doubts after listening to Tantai Yu's words, she finally solved the puzzle. No matter in the previous life or this life, Qi Xianqing's age had long exceeded the limit, but he still lived well. It turned out that it was not because he took any elixir to prolong his life, but because he was an extremely transcendent existence. Even if time had worn away his memory, he still couldn't die. At the end of the night, there was a glimmer of light in the morning. Su Li quietly left the Imperial Palace and met with Tantai Yu. "Junior Sister Apprentice, are you okay?" Tantai Yu didn't care about the surveillance of the surrounding Imperial guards, and he nervously transmitted the sound in low voice. "Father came suddenly, and I couldn't inform you." Hearing Tantai Yu's words of concern, Su Li came back from her chaotic thoughts and temporarily restrained her thoughts. She shook her head and smiled. "It doesn't matter. The attitude of the Emperor is very kind, and the disease of concubine in." Speaking of this, Su Li deliberately lengthened the tone. The surrounding black-scale army heard it, and they all pricked up their ears and paid attention to the next words. Tantai Yu couldn't help but be surprised and said, "Junior Sister Apprentice, do you really have a way to cure my mother?" You know, even after the master entered the Imperial Palace, he left with a disappointed face, and there was no way to cure concubine Yin's disease. Did the Junior Sister Apprentice really surpass the master's medical skills in just 2 years? Su Li shook her head and smiled, and pretended to be shy. "Senior fellow apprentice, what are you talking about? How can I cure concubine Yin with my little tricks? But I know that there is a person who can definitely do it, and that person happens to be in Tianji country. I think it won't take long for concubine Yin to wake up." Su Li's words were not true, but with the existence of Tantai Feng, even if it was false, someone would believe it. Tantai Yu was immediately surprised and happy, and couldn't help but ask, "Junior Sister Apprentice, who is the person you are talking about?" Su Li smiled slightly, and a light flashed in her eyes. She slowly said 3 words. "Mr. Li, it was him." Tantai Yu couldn't help but be stunned. He went to the Han country to participate in the auction last year, and certainly heard the name of this person. At that time, he was still guessing who had better medical skills between him and the master. He didn't expect that would be confirmed so soon. Unfortunately, The master was not in Tianji country. Accompanied by Tantai Yu, Su Li returned to Tianji Yin, but she didn't immediately return to Dahan country. She had already laid the groundwork, and the rest was to see Tantai Feng's action. However, Tianji country and Dahan country were very similar. One person's words were the law. It was believed that the news would spread in a few days. However, after waiting for 2 days, Su Li didn't wait for the news that Tantai Yu entered the East Palace, but she waited for an uninvited guest. "Where is Su Li? Take me there." "Second princess, the fourth lord has ordered that you can't. Get out. I want to ask what the little bitch did to make the fourth brother end up like this." The noise outside came into her ears. Su Li, who was meditating and practicing, trembled her eyelashes. She opened her eyes and saw Fong Yuan's eyes full of inquiry. Su Li frowned slightly. Of course, she knew who the person was. It was Tantai Mingwe. From her tone, it seemed that senior fellow apprentice was in trouble. Could it be that Tantai Feng broke his promise? As this thought flashed in her mind, Su Li's eyes flashed slightly. She opened her red lips slightly and said, "Bring her here." Fong Yuan opened the door without saying anything. But after a dozen breaths, he carried Tantai Mingwe, who was like a frightened rabbit, in the room like a chicken. From her reaction, Su Li knew that Fong Yuan's method of bringing her here was certainly not very gentle. Seeing that she lost her elegance, Su Li rubbed her eyebrows with a headache and said helplessly, "Who let you do it?" Fong Yuan looked at Tantai Mingwe coldly. He loosened his hand and threw her rudely to the ground. He looked dissatisfied. "She scolded you." He heard clearly that he called her little bitch just now. So, even if he knew that Su Li asked him to invite Tantai Mingwe to come here, he couldn't help but do it. Tantai Mingwe knelt on the ground and heard Fong Yuan's words. She was angry, but her body shook more violently. Chapter 300. "Ooh, who the hell are you?" Tantai Mingwe looked at Su Li, who was sitting at the table, with a helpless expression. She suppressed the fear in her heart and asked, how could a princess of the secular country make a senior at the peak of the inborn realm willing to follow her? Moreover, she was a young, inborn expert at the age of 20. Su Li was really not simple, as she thought when she met her for the first time. But she didn't expect that Su Li's background could be so strong. "It doesn't matter who I am." Su Li looked back at Tantai Mingwe. Since Fong Yuan had exposed something, she didn't bother to continue to pretend. "You should be glad that you have a good younger brother. Otherwise, based on what you said outside, even if I killed you, your father wouldn't have a single word of objection." Tantai Mingwe trembled, and the first thought was that Su Li was scaring her. She was the favorite daughter of her father. How could she be afraid of Su Li? But when she thought of Fong Yuan's cultivation, she didn't dare to say a word. "Well, you don't have to be too afraid. Tell me what happened to senior fellow apprentice Yu?" Seeing Tantai Mingwe couldn't help being scared, Su Li gave up the idea of continuing to frighten her and asked aloud. After Su Li mentioned it, Tantai Mingwe suddenly remembered the business. She didn't have time to be afraid and said quickly, "Miss Su, fourth brother was taken away by Tantai Dong. You go to save him." "Tantai Dong?" Su Li frowned, and Fong Yuan reminded her in time, "It's the first prince. The woman who made trouble in the Tianji and was a chess piece in the hands of the first princess." During this time, Chu Qingning and others were not idle in the inn, and they had investigated a lot of information. Yes, Tantai Dong was unhappy because father gave the Tianji in to fourth brother. Tantai Mingwe continued, "Yesterday, I don't know how the news was leaked. He knew that fourth brother secretly entered the palace with the help of mother. He immediately detained fourth brother in the name of abuse of private power." Tantai Mingwe said anxiously, "Fourth brother was arrested this morning. It has been half a day. I don't know how he is now." Su Li raised her eyebrows and looked at Fong Yuan. The latter immediately understood and turned away. Tantai Mingwe was confused. Before long, Chu Qingning and Fong Mu came in. Fong Mu glanced at Tantai Mingwe, who was still kneeling on the ground, and said, "Eldest brother has set off. The dragon car is downstairs." "Then let's go." Suli got up and glanced at Tantai Mingyue, who was happy. Take her with you. Outside the first prince's residence, a dragon carriage stopped at the entrance. Immediately, the guards on both sides of the gate tensed up. Whoosh! The door of the dragon carriage opened, and a group of people led by Suli got off. Tantai Mingyue looked up and saw the words First Prince's Mansion. She was relieved and couldn't help but step forward to enter the mansion, but was stopped by the guards on both sides. Second Princess. His First Highness said that the residence is under martial law and that unauthorized people are not allowed to enter. At this moment, Tantai Mingyue had recovered the imposing manner of a princess. When she heard the guard's words, her pretty face turned slightly cold, and she said coldly, "Presumptuous! This empress is a member of the imperial family, and this is the residence of my eldest imperial brother. How can I be regarded as an outsider? You're just a guard. Do you want to offend me?" When the guard heard the words, his face changed slightly, but he still did not step aside. Instead, he said, "Second Princess, if you're here for the fourth prince, you can go back now." His Highness the First Prince said that everything was a misunderstanding, and he had already let the fourth prince go. Now the first prince's mansion is under martial law, and it has nothing to do with the fourth prince. Tantai Mingyue was stunned when she heard the words. She looked slightly relaxed and hesitated for a while. She really wanted to go back to see whether the fourth brother really returned to the mansion. If the first brother let the fourth brother go, her unscrupulous behavior would inevitably aggravate the conflict. It was not a good strategy. At this moment, Suli, who looked indifferent without any change, stood in front of her and faced the two guards. Tantai Mingyue was slightly stunned. She, who had been a master for many years, realized at this moment that this action would not change because of her thoughts. Whether the senior fellow apprentice has gone back or not, we will know when we go in. Suli didn't look at the two guards. Her eyes seemed to see everything inside through the gate. Feng Yuan, open the gate. As soon as she finished speaking, the gate immediately made a loud sound and slowly opened inward. Feng Yuan's straight figure fell into the eyes of everyone, and the two guards were completely stunned. Then he became furious. Who is so presumptuous? How dare you break into the first prince's mansion without permission? Feng Yuan seemed not to hear the words of the two guards. He walked directly out of the gate and said as if there was no one else, "I have found him. He is safe for the time being." Su Li's eyes darkened, and her eyebrows were full of anger. Safe for the time being? That meant he was injured? When the two guards heard Feng Yuan's words, their faces suddenly changed. When they were about to shout, they were slapped unconscious by Chu Qingning. After that, Chu Qingning did not forget to say, "You two little ants, who gave you the courage to chirp here?" After dealing with the two guards, Su Li and others filed in. Soon they were found by other patrolling guards and surrounded. A trace of impatience flashed across Su Li's face. She said lightly, "Rush in as fast as you can. Don't hold back." Hearing her words, Yin Yi and others, who had not fought before, immediately became excited. A group of more than a dozen people rushed into the crowd like wolves into a flock of sheep. For a moment, screams were constantly heard. In the blood rain, Suli followed the guidance of Feng Yuan all the way to the depth of the courtyard. Her plain white clothes were not stained with blood at all. Tantai Mingyue stared blankly at Su Li's figure. She stood in the same place and felt cold all over. The girl's figure, which was originally delicate and lovely in her eyes, was as deep as an abyss at this moment. All of them are in the inborn realm. She turned her head and saw the one-sided battle scene. She was terrified. Who could expect that all the young men and women around Su Li had reached the inborn realm without exception, and none of them reached the inborn fifth hurdle? Su Li, was she the legendary young lord of a sect in the spiritual circle? At the same time, endless regret spread in her heart. She couldn't figure out why Su Li directly rushed in when she came to ask for people. What should I do? She is so unscrupulous. Even my father will be furious and put all the blame on the fourth brother. The fourth brother is at a critical moment. Tantai Dong is worried that he can't find a chance to pull him down, but Su Li directly sends the opportunity to him. What is she thinking? Tantai Mingwe was so angry that she almost vomited blood. Even if Tantai Yu was rescued today, he would not be the emperor. No, I have to follow them. If Su Li directly kills Tantai Dong, won't my fourth brother be in trouble? Thinking of this, Tantai Mingwe anxiously followed. She had no doubt about whether Su Li dared to kill Tantai Dong. When Tantai Mingwe chased to the backyard, Su Li was already standing outside a courtyard. There were 9 inborn seniors recruited by the first prince to guard outside the courtyard. It was very lively, but now they were all beheaded, and their corpses lay quietly on the grass outside the courtyard. Therefore, it became a quiet courtyard. Tantai Mingwe followed Su Li and saw these corpses. She couldn't help but be frightened. She had a new understanding of Fang Yuan's cultivation. Su Li glanced at it and frowned slightly. Fang Yuan's hostility became heavier. Some of it was influenced by the last trip to Nanjiang, but most of it was probably because he was imitating, and the person he imitated was herself. Su Li thought about it, and a trace of bitterness appeared in her mouth. She asked herself honestly, and it seemed that she was not qualified to say that others were heavy with hostility. Just because of the accumulation of a lifetime, she could control the killing intent freely. The hostility was integrated into her bones and did not leak. But Fang Yuan just started. This was a sign of stepping into the evil circle. The evil circle is free and unfettered. Everything is according to the heart, but he seems to be controlled by the killing intent. It takes time to settle the understanding and eliminate the obsession. Unfortunately, I don't have so much time. Su Li sighed softly, pushed open the courtyard, and stepped into it. Although Tantai Mingwe didn't know why she sighed, she didn't dare to ask more. She quickly followed in and whispered, "There is a senior beside Tantai Dong. Although he doesn't have much life, he is at the peak of the inborn realm. Should we wait for your protector Fang?" Before Tantai Mingwe finished her words, a figure suddenly flashed beside Su Li. Fang Yuan, who was in black without blood, had already appeared. Fang Yuan looked at Tantai Mingwe, who was stunned, and said expressionlessly, "I will lead the way." Su Li was silent for a moment. She took a deep look at Fang Yuan, who was extremely serious, and nodded gently. Okay. Fang Yuan's eyes were slightly fixed, as if he had finally determined something. There was a trace of bitterness in his expressionless face. He didn't say anything and went straight inside. She sighed again. Tantai Mingwe was confused. She didn't know what the master and the servant were talking about, but she cared about Tantai Yu now, so she immediately followed Fang Yuan in. The courtyard was very small and could be seen at a glance. In the middle of the courtyard, there was a high scaffold, which was stained with blood. Tantai Yu was hanging on it, dying. Fourth brother. Tantai Mingwe was so angry that her eyes almost popped out. She no longer felt that what Su Li had done was too much. Endless anger rushed from her heart to her mind in an instant, burning up her reason. Tantai Dong, you are courting death. Ha, second sister, who are you talking about? I am your elder brother. Before Tantai Mingwe finished her words, laughter sounded from the house. Then the door of the house was opened, and a handsome young man in a golden robe walked out slowly. Behind him was a wrinkled old man in a gray robe with a stooped body. He occasionally leaked a trace of pneuma, which even shocked Fang Yuan, not to mention Tantai Mingwe. Long longevity realm. Tantai Mingwe's face was pale. She stared at the old man in gray, who made her tremble. Even her father didn't have that kind of pneuma. She only felt it from the old minister of offerings of the Tantai family. Chapter 301. Let's go. Su Li, let's go quickly. The longevity realm is the divine realm. Even if you have more guards of the inborn realm, you can't stop him. Only in the palace. Only the minister of the longevity realm in the palace can save us. Tantai Mingwe transmitted the sound in horror and stepped back quickly. She had no time to care about Tantai Yu, who was still hanging on the scaffold. The reason under the fear told her that if she didn't go to the palace to find help, she couldn't save anyone. But before she walked a few steps, a ghostly figure suddenly appeared in front of the courtyard gate. It was the gray-clothed elder. Tantai Mingwe stopped and looked back. She was shocked when she saw Tantai Dong standing alone in the same place. When did he appear? She didn't even notice it at all. The gray-clothed elder didn't seem to know the situation outside. At this moment, he saw the corpses outside the courtyard in his psychic awareness. His face instantly turned cold. Tantai Mingwe, you have such hidden power. You even killed all the seniors I recruited. If I hadn't broken through this time, I'm afraid I would have been killed by you. Hearing the elder's words, Tantai Dong's smile was slightly stiff. Elder Hui, what did you say? The gray-clothed elder raised his head and looked disrespectful. He said bluntly to Tantai Dong, Your First Highness, all the diners I recruited for you were killed by your second sister. According to the previous agreement, you should know what to do, right? As soon as the words came out, Tantai Mingwe was slightly stunned. Immediately, her eyes lit up with hope. She said, Elder Sir, I don't know what the deal is between you and the first brother. As long as you are willing to work for my fourth brother, I am willing to pay double. Second sister, Tantai Dong, who was hesitant, couldn't help laughing angrily when he heard Tantai Mingwe poaching him in front of him. What do you think Elder Hui is? You can't move him easily. You can't give him what he wants. Tantai Mingwe secretly glanced at Su Li, who had walked to the scaffold. She couldn't help but gnash her teeth. Elder Hui, I believe that there is a way. What's more, you don't know me. How do you know that I can't give you what you want? Upon hearing this, the gray-robed old man immediately smiled amiably. Your Highness, although what you said makes some sense, it's still not enough. But your elder brother is right. Why one is half of the treasury of Tianji country and the core design of the dragon vehicle. Now do you still think you can give me double the price? Hearing Elder Hui's words, Tantai Mingwe was completely shocked. She looked at Tantai Dong with a gloomy expression unbelievably. Big brother, you actually shut up? Tantai Dong was full of anger. He suppressed Tantai Mingwe's voice and scolded. If it was before, I only needed to pay the design drawings to sit on the throne. Now I have to pay half of the national treasury, all thanks to you. What qualifications do you have to lecture me? Tantai Mingwe's body trembled slightly, not because of guilt, but because the nominal elder brother in front of her had been completely crazy for the throne. After all, Tantai Dong was in a high position. After taking a deep breath, he recovered his calmness. He first bowed to Elder Hui from a distance and said, Don't worry, Elder Hui. As long as I can take charge of Tianji country, you will be the national master of Tianji country. All the requirements I promised before will be fulfilled. Haha, that's good. The old man in gray nodded and smiled. Although he succeeded in breaking through by relying on the resources of the first prince, he obviously didn't take Tantai Dong seriously after breaking through. Big brother, you are inviting a wolf into the house. Father will never allow you to do this. Tantai Mingwe still wanted to struggle. Tantai Dong just sneered and said softly, For the sake of father, I can keep you and fourth brother alive. But others must be punished for treason. The injuries on you and fourth brother are also caused by them. Do you understand? After saying this, Tantai Dongshin seemed to have made a decision, and his whole person became relaxed. He didn't believe that with the help of Elder Hui, other brothers could make any trouble. Even father would no longer ignore him and really treat him as a crown prince. Ding! A crisp sound interrupted Tantai Dong's dream. Everyone heard the sound and immediately saw Su Li, who had been ignored for a long time, gently put Tantai Yu on the ground. Elder Hui's pupil shrank, and he looked at the broken chain on the ground. He didn't hear any sound before. When did the chain break? Elder Hui was still hesitating whether to take action or not, but Tantai Dong was angry. He waved his hand to slap Su Li. Where does this silly girl come from? You are courting death. Su Li slowly raised her eyes and looked calm. She saw the palm approaching quickly. Tantai Mingwe screamed in horror. Su Li hide. It was true that Su Li had a group of very strong fans, but she had never seen Su Li fight. Su Li's face had always been pale and delicate. She guessed that. Su Li was at most in the acquired realm, while Tantai Dong had the cultivation of the inborn second hurdle. How could Su Li be his opponent? Seeing that Su Li was motionless, as if she was scared silly, Tantai Dong laughed and moved faster. Second sister, the helper you invited is still a little inexperienced. Little girl, remember to be more careful in the next life. Don't follow the wrong person. Go to hell. At the moment when the palm print came, an extremely fast sword light flashed in front of Su Li, and then there was one more person beside Su Li, Fong Yuan. Puff! A broken arm flew in the air, and blood sprayed. Su Li took a step back, just avoiding all the blood rain. My arm! Tantai Dong held his right arm, which only had the upper arm, and made a very sad voice. It all happened so fast that people had no time to react. The battle was over before the smile on Elder Huey's face disappeared. First Highness. Elder Huey's face was gloomy. He rushed out, but he was stopped by another indifferent young man. Luo Yichen reached out and stroked the bloodless blade in his hand. His eyes were full of fighting intent. He said lightly, "Old guy, you can't go there yet. Ignorant boy, get out of here." Elder Hui was furious. His extraordinary momentum broke out completely from his old body. He and Tantai Dong were now bound together for good or bad. Tantai Dong's arm was cut off because of his carelessness. Tantai Dong couldn't have any mishap in the following days. Crack! Crack! The horrible pressure was like a mountain, and Luo Yichen's bones made an unbearable sound. He stepped back a few steps, but just a few steps. Then the fighting intent in his eyes was more intense, and the long blade in his hand turned into a snow-white light. "Take this. You're courting death." Elder Hui was very anxious and tried his best to fight with Luo Yichen. In the blink of an eye, he had fought with Luo Yichen dozens of times. Luo Yichen's body was covered with countless scars, but his pneuma did not decline at all. Instead, the light of the blade in his hand became more dazzling. He blocked it? Tantai Mingyue stared at the two people who were raging in the courtyard. If her skin hadn't been hurt by the sharp wind of the blade, she would have thought that she was in a dream. Suddenly, she thought of something and looked at Su Li, who was firmly protected by Fong Yuan. Her eyes were full of deep fear. A man at the peak of the inborn realm, who could not be defeated by a practitioner of the longevity realm, also obeyed Su Li. She thought that she had known all about Su Li, but now she found that Su Li was like an abyss, and she could never see the depth. One end of the courtyard was fighting fiercely, but the momentum could not be passed to Su Li because it was all blocked by Fong Yuan. Su Li squatted down and felt the pulse for Tantai Yu. Then her eyebrows immediately relaxed. It's just a skin injury. Although he fainted due to excessive blood loss, it's not a big deal. Su Li took out a healing elixir and stuffed it into Tantai Yu's mouth. Then her eyes fell on Tantai Dong, who was holding his broken arm. After Luo Yichen blocked Elder Hui, Tantai Dong immediately panicked. He completely lost his previous arrogance. Instead, he covered his mouth and did not dare to make a sound, for fear that he would disturb Su Li and lose his life. From time to time, he looked at the two people who were still fighting. Facing Fong Yuan's increasingly oppressive eyes, his forehead gradually broke into a cold sweat, and he was not confident enough to say, Who are you?" Elder Hui is the elder of Shaoshan Palace in the spiritual circle. He will definitely win. You'd better let me go, otherwise. Su Li raised her eyebrows and looked at Tantai Mingyue. She laughed and said, "The first prince of Tianji country only has such a state of mind." Tantai Mingyue was speechless for a while. No one would perform well in the face of life and death. "I won't hurt your life." Su Li got up and no longer looked at Tantai Dong. "Your fate should be decided by your father himself." Although in her opinion, with Tantai Feng's vision, other people were dispensable except for concubine Yin, who had accompanied him for countless years. But in order to hide from a mirror spirit of reincarnation mirror, she should not do too much. After that, Su Li glanced at the battlefield, which was tilted to Elder Hui, and said softly, "In order to prove his strength, Luo Yichen has reached the limit. In addition, the old man has just broken through." After a battle, his genuine energy has been integrated, and his strength has increased by more than 20%. If you don't go, you'll be killed. Fang Yuan nodded when he heard the words. He turned around and paused, saying, I'll be back soon. Su Li smiled sweetly and did not speak. Tantai Mingwei heard Su Li's analysis and was confused. But she still heard that Su Li's grasp of the battle situation was still above Fang Yuan's. Could it be that Su Li was able to win over so many young seniors by her absolute eyesight? Tantai Mingwei was puzzled and still didn't think that Su Li had Xiangong. Seeing the situation in the field stabilized again, she couldn't help but worry and whispered, Miss Su, why do I feel that the two of them are still no match for Elder Hui? Chapter 302. Then, what should we do? Tantai Mingwei was more and more worried. Today's series of changes and shocks had made her completely lose the calmness that a royal princess should have. Tantai Dong, who was kneeling on the ground, heard the words and stared at the battle in the courtyard. Because of Su Li's words, he seemed to regain his hope. Bang boom, the three people fought fiercely, and the genuine energy surged like a huge wave. The broken courtyard wall finally couldn't bear it and collapsed, revealing Chu Qingning and others who were rushing outside the wall. Su Li didn't care about anything else and stared at the development of the battle with her dark starry eyes. This battle came at the right time for Fang Yuan and Luo Yichen. An ordinary practitioner who had just broken through the longevity realm gave them enough pressure. If they could comprehend something, with the support of her resources, they could cross the barrier soon and become real practitioners. As time went on slowly, Fang Yuan and Luo Yichen's genuine energy was about to be exhausted and their pneuma was weak. Although Elder Hui was disheveled and embarrassed, his pneuma was still strong and even more mellow than before. Under such circumstances, the two of them immediately seemed to be unable to resist. Ha 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 ha! Elder Hui gave a long roar, and the grievance on his face disappeared. He laughed ferociously and said, You two little bastards, if I hadn't just broken through, how could I allow you to bully me like this? Now, I will let you taste the real power of the longevity realm. Boom! A destructive power burst out from Elder Hui, and everything around him was shaken into powder. Luo Yichen and Fang Yuan's expressions changed dramatically at the same time, and they retreated without saying a word. But they retreated quickly, while Elder Hui moved faster. In the blink of an eye, he was above them. His hands were like claws, and he grabbed at their heads. Danger, retreat. Tantai Mingwei was so anxious that her voice changed. But Fang Yuan and Luo Yichen had reached the extreme speed, and it was impossible for them to retreat. In this split second, Su Li squinted her eyes and pointed to the distance, shooting out a starlight as fast as a strand of hair. Fast. Too fast. Even Tantai Mingwei only saw that Su Li made a meaningless movement and didn't see any genuine energy bursting out of her fingertips. At the same time, a sense of life and death crisis rose in Elder Huey's heart. Fear instantly magnified in his eyes. What is that? His mind was blank, and he couldn't care about Fang Yuan and Li Mu anymore. He tried his best to avoid it, but his mind was transmitted to his body. Before he could make any response, his eyebrows were penetrated. Everything came to an abrupt end. Thump! How can this be? This old man's everything has just begun. Elder Huey's body fell to the ground like a piece of leather. His turbid eyes were filled with disbelief. He only managed to say one sentence before he breathed his last. Phew! Su Li gently exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. She calmed down and felt it. Then she slightly raised her lips. This person's strength was even lower than Lin Yanxing's, so there was nothing to be happy about. What made her happy was that with the steady improvement of her cultivation, the consumption of her foundation was indeed less than before. If she could find a suitable balance point, she would be able to stay in the world for a longer time. If the old ancestor of Shaoshan Palace can't fight like Tanai Feng, then Shaoshan Palace is nothing to me. However, if I want to rest easy, I must fight with that person. Su Li's eyes flashed a touch of caution. She didn't know how long that person had lived and had endless means. She was not prepared enough. Su. Miss Su. A voice sounded in her ears, which pulled Su Li back to reality from her thoughts. She turned around and saw Tantai Mingwei. The latter was immediately like a frightened rabbit. Her face turned pale and her mouth opened and closed for a long time, but she couldn't say a complete sentence. She only saw that Su Li stretched out her hand and slowly pointed forward. Then the practitioner of the longevity realm, who had transcended mortality and entered holiness, died. If Fang Yuan and Luo Yichen were not still sitting on the messy floor and gasping, she even thought that the old ancestor of the longevity realm was fake, killing Elder Hui with one finger. Su Li, what is her cultivation? Tantai Mingwei couldn't help but quietly look at Su Li's side face. The girl in front of her looked harmless, but she was far from her imagination. Clean him up. Anyway, he is a practitioner of the longevity realm. Let him rest in peace. Su Li looked at the old man's empty wrist and said to Chu Qingning and others. Then she walked to Fang Yuan and Chu Qingning and handed out 2 elixirs. You did a good job. Recover and comprehend well. Break through as soon as possible. Fang Yuan took the elixir without hesitation and continued to meditate. He was determined and would not treat Su Li as an outsider. Luo Yichen hesitated for a moment and took the elixir. He whispered, "Thank you. I still have some private affairs to deal with in Tianji country." "I don't know," Su Li said with a faint smile. "Luo Yichen, have you forgotten who you are?" Luo Yichen's face changed slightly, and he became silent. How could he forget that he had promised to work for Su Li for 10 years? Now only 2 years had passed, and Su Li had invested so much in him that it was far more than his 10 years of loyalty. Now he proposed to act alone. Even he himself felt that it was very inappropriate. He closed his eyes and recalled the humiliation he suffered in the past. He gritted his teeth and said, "Su Li, I know that I can't repay what I owe you in this life, but stop." Su Li interrupted Luo Yichen's words and smiled sweetly. "You seem to have misunderstood me. It's just a deal between you and me. I'm not interested in knowing what you're carrying, but just like I helped Chu Qingning and others, I will not stop you, and I will lend you my strength." Luo Yichen's body shook slightly, and his face changed. His lips moved, but he didn't know what to say. A deal? Su Li had been talking about a deal, but what he saw was Su Li's unilateral contribution. Whether it was practicing resources or revenge for them, what did Su Li want? With your current strength, it's easy for you to deal with a secular force. It seems that the force you offended before is not a small one. Heal your injury first, and then take Chu Qingning and others with you. You should know that I don't need to be afraid of anyone except for a few people in this world. As for Fang Yuan, Su Li glanced at the indifferent young man who was still in meditation and said, "He is on the verge of breaking through. When he wakes up, it's up to him." Luo Yichen was silent for a long time and finally didn't refuse as before. He said very seriously, "No matter what your purpose is, as long as it's not related to Shaohan, I will unconditionally execute your order." After that, he closed his eyes and continued to seize the time to heal. This sentence was a lifelong promise for him. The rest was needless to say. Su Li smiled slightly. All living beings in the illusion could not be real, and she was not the real herself. Luo Yichen's promise was very serious, and he made up his mind to follow it for the rest of his life. But it was just an illusion, so there was no need to care about it. "Miss, everything is ready." After a while, Yin Yi ran to report. Su Li looked at the yard that became clean except for the blood on the ground. She nodded and turned to Tantai Mingwei, who was absent-minded, and said, "I'll leave the rest of the mess to you. Is there any problem?" Tantai Mingwei came to her senses and nodded quickly. "Of course, it's up to you." After Su Li's rampage, the first prince's mansion had almost no decent fighting capacity, so it didn't take much effort for her to deal with it. "Your father will not investigate what happened today, and there will be an imperial edict in a few days. You'd better keep my matter to yourself, and don't let anyone know it, especially Tantai Yu." Su Li's indifferent eyes flashed a trace of sharpness, which made Tantai Mingyue's heart tremble slightly. She said, "As for the life of the first prince, when Tantai Yu wakes up, it's up to him to decide." What happened later had nothing to do with Su Li. She returned to Tianji Inn and let the news that the first prince's mansion was attacked spread all over Tianji City. She practiced quietly, and with the constant consumption of foundation, her cultivation steadily improved. Less than 3 days later, an amazing news finally spread. It turns out that the first prince wanted to rebel and was suppressed by the fourth prince. I heard that the first prince's arm was cut off by the second princess, and he was already a useless person. Today, the imperial edict of the imperial palace has been issued. His Majesty appointed the fourth prince as the crown prince. Even if the first prince is still as powerful as before, he can't do anything after the fourth prince controls the hidden power of the Tantai family. Tut! Who can think that the position of the crown prince is finally won by the fourth prince, who has the mildest temperament? There is no lack of help from concubine Yin, but I'm afraid that the fourth prince fought for more. His Highness also has a good sister. He just got the position of the crown prince firmly. Unless he doesn't want to be the crown prince himself, no one can pull him down. The officials in the imperial court were talking about it. At the same time, in the East Palace, Tantai Yu, who was wearing the crown prince robe, looked at the extremely exquisite scenery outside the East Palace with a confused face. What does Imperial Father mean by those words? Tantai Yu frowned tightly. After being caught by Tantai Dong, he was beaten to a coma. He thought that everything was over. Unexpectedly, as soon as he woke up, he received the imperial edict to take over the position of the crown prince. After he recovered from his injury, he was secretly summoned by Father. Father's order made him even more surprised. Even if Mr. Li cured my mother, Father will not exaggerate to use all the power of the country for Mr. Li, right? And according to Father's words, my crown prince is appointed by Mr. Li. And Father also agreed? Tantai Yu was full of doubts. What he heard today almost exceeded the limit of the palace education he received for more than a decade. A hermit in Jianghu could influence the next master of Tianji country and even become the controller behind Tianji country. It was too exaggerated. Father, aren't you afraid that Tianji country and Tantai family will be destroyed by Mr. Li? Chapter 303. Let's not talk about the reaction of the palace first. Let's go back to the day when Luo Yiqin left Tantai City. Chu Qingming and others followed Luo Yiqin all the way and finally arrived at a provincial city before sunset. Tianji country, like Dehan country, implemented a provincial system. It was only a day's ride from Tantai City. It should be the nearest provincial city to the capital. Luo West City. Chu Qingming pulled the reins and stopped the horse. He looked up and saw the 3 black stone characters modeled by wind and frost, but they could still be seen clearly. He said excitedly, "Brother Luo, is this your hometown?" Luo Yiqin didn't seem to hear Chu Qingming's words. He looked at the ancient city under the setting sun and was lost in thought. He didn't answer. His indifferent face was the same as Feng Yuan's, but there was a touch of complexity. "Brother Luo?" Chu Qingming wanted to ask again, but he was pulled by Feng Mu. Feng Mu reminded him in a low voice, "Brother Chu, I think Brother Luo is very sad. Don't disturb him." Tut! Chu Qingming raised his eyebrows and couldn't help but mutter, "As a man, if you don't agree, just do it. Why are there so many twists and turns? Will your cultivation speed be faster if you do this?" Feng Mu almost laughed. In the past 2 years, Brother Chu had been struggling with the progress of cultivation. No matter how hard he tried to catch up, his cultivation was always slower than eldest brother and Brother Luo. It can only be said that fate made fools of people. When they talked in a low voice, Luo Yiqin had taken back his sight and glanced at the notice board beside the city gate. One of the wanted posters was so rotten that its face couldn't be seen clearly. After a moment of silence, he finally said, "Let's enter the city. Let's go. Brother Luo, don't think so much. We have Su Li. What else do you need to worry about?" It's really tiring to run all the way. Let's find an inn to have a rest first. Chu Qingning handed the horse to Feng Mu, took Luo Yichen's arm, and walked to the city. Being disturbed by him, Luo Yichen's annoyance dissipated a lot. He immediately smiled bitterly and let Chu Qingning take him into the city. Brother Chu is really good at ordering people, Feng Mu said in a low voice after they went far away. Then he handed the horse to Yun Yi and ran to the notice board. He looked at it for a long time, but couldn't see the appearance of the person on the wanted poster that Luo Yichen had just seen. Forget it. Anyway, I'm sure I'll know a lot about Brother Luo's past. I'm not in a hurry. Feng Mu clapped his hands and quickly entered the city, leaving Yun Yi, who was holding 4 horses, helplessly. This group of people that Miss has recruited are indeed dragons and phoenixes among men, but their temperaments are really— Yun Yi shook his head. He handed all the horses to the other cloud guards and followed them. He was not slacking off. The people in front of him were penniless. If he didn't catch up with them, he might make a fool of himself when he arrived at the inn. Although Luoyua City was not as prosperous as Tantai City, it was not a desolate place. Under the arrangement of Yun Yi, they soon stayed in a very good inn. After putting their luggage, a group of 13 people went downstairs and found 3 tables to sit down. The food had not been served yet. Chu Qingning didn't need to listen very much to know what had happened in the city recently from the discussions of the diners around him. A fat man weighing 150 kilograms crushed his wife to death when he got married. And he also got into a lawsuit? Oh my God. Wow. The poor scholar was kept by the rich woman of the cloth workshop because of his face. Being handsome means that you can do whatever you want. Fortunately, this young master's looks are not bad either. Chu Qingning sighed narcissistically while listening. His voice was so loud that it attracted the attention of the diners around him. The cloud guards, who had not had much contact with him, were embarrassed and chose to sit further away. Feng Mu and Yun Yi had already been used to it. They were thick-skinned because of Chu Qingning. They just waited for the food to be served and didn't care about anything else. After a while, the hot food was finally served. When Chu Qingning saw the food, he finally stopped talking to himself and started to eat and drink. Luo Yichen, who was relaxed after being disturbed by him, smiled slightly. He was about to enjoy the hometown food that he hadn't seen for many years, but the conversation from the next table made him completely stop. Hey, have you heard? It's about the Luo family. It's too slow for you to get the news. If it's your turn to say it, the miss of the Luo family may have been married. Speaking of the Luo family, it's really miserable. It was originally a good business family, and even a martial arts champion was about to come out. But because the young master took a fancy to Luo Yingying's beauty, the Luo family was ruined. Hush! You even dare to talk nonsense about that person. Don't you want to live? The scholar who was warned seemed to be unhappy when he heard the words. He straightened his neck and said, "What's the matter? She is dead. I just said it. Is it possible that something bad will happen?" Slurp. Chu Qingning drank a mouthful of soup and swallowed the food in his mouth. His eyes were slightly bright, and he whispered, "Brother Luo, what the 2 people said just now, could it be?" Luo Yichen put down the chopsticks, and the ease on his face disappeared. When he was about to get up, the door was suddenly kicked open, and then a group of servants in standard clothes came in. The fat servant who was the leader was dressed more delicately. He seemed to be a small leader. His fat face shook, and his mung bean eyes swept the field. Suddenly, his eyes fixed on the scholar who spoke before, and he said with a grim smile, "Boy, you dare to make rumors and make trouble in the territory of the He family. Do you want to die? Catch him and take him back to be punished." The scholar immediately panicked. He turned around and wanted to escape, but how could a scholar like him be a match for a martial artist? Soon, his face was pressed against the dishes on the table, and he couldn't move. The wine and dishes were scattered all over the floor. "Mercy, mercy. I just said it casually. I didn't mean it." The vague voice of the scholar came from the dishes. The strong man who pressed him saw it with cold eyes and exerted force. The scholar immediately screamed and couldn't speak. The rest of the diners were silent and gathered together in a panic, as if they could be safer in this way. The fat servant walked over with a complacent smile on his face, as if he was enjoying the fearful gazes. However, he was soon unable to smile, because there were actually 3 tables where the people were sitting calmly, not moving at all. Oh, I forgot to remind them that the people at these 3 tables are the same group. They're all foreigners. How can they know the background of the Heath family? The shopkeeper hid behind the counter and saw this scene. He complained in his heart. If they fought, his inn would suffer. The fat servant saw the grinning Chu Qingning at a glance. It was not because of anything else, but because the smile on Chu Qingning's face was too mean, which made him very angry. He was used to being domineering, except for the master, who dared to smile in front of him. He pointed at Chu Qingning and immediately ordered, "Where are the fools? How dare they continue to sit when they see me? Catch them all. If they resist, break their legs directly." The smile on Chu Qingning's face disappeared immediately. He stood up and was about to say something, but his arm was grabbed by a hand. He looked back and saw Luo Yichen, who was full of fear. He said to him, "The He family is the family of the current prime minister and the empress. Although Su Li made a deal with the emperor and made Tantai Yu the crown prince, he was just the crown prince. If the contradiction between him and the He family was put on the surface, maybe Su Li's arrangement would be ruined because of him. So, even if Su Li told him to do it, he still hesitated and hesitated all the way." Chu Qingning immediately laughed and said, "I wonder why you have a dead face all the way. It turns out that you didn't listen to Su Li's instructions at all." "Instructions?" Luo Yichen was confused. What did she say? The fat servant, who was standing at the side, heard the 2 of them talking back and forth, not taking him seriously at all. His face instantly turned green, and he immediately shouted in exasperation, "What are you waiting for? Attack! Good timing. My hands are itchy." Chu Qingning laughed and immediately rushed into the servants like a tiger into a flock of sheep. His laughter echoed behind him. "Xiaomu, you tell him." Feng Mu saw that Chu Qingning was the first one and couldn't help but say anxiously, "Brother Chu, leave 2 for me. I haven't had enough last time." After saying that, he didn't care about anything else and directly rushed into the crowd. The 2 of them attacked one after another, and each of their attacks hit the legs of the thugs. The sound of bones breaking rang out incessantly. The innkeeper and the group of diners were instantly stunned, and they even forgot to escape. Alas, she didn't leave any for me again. In the blink of an eye, the battle was coming to an end. Yuni sighed and smiled to Luo Yichen, who was stunned. "Protector Luo, you don't have to worry about Miss at all. Before you came, Miss ordered that you could do whatever you want in Tianji country, except for tearing down the imperial palace. Do whatever you want." Luo Yichen took a deep breath, and his heart was instantly filled with an inexplicable sense of heroism. How could he be so confident to say such words? I was wrong. Nanjiang country is like this. Tianji country is nothing, let alone a family in Tianji country. No matter how big the He family is, how can it be bigger than the Tantai family? Luo Yichen figured it out and was in a good mood. The knot in his heart in the past few days was instantly dispelled. When he was about to vent his anger, he found that the battle had already ended. The servants were wailing all over the ground. Without exception, their legs were broken. The fat servant was even more miserable. He was punched by Chu Qingning, and his 3rd leg was also broken. Crack! Chu Qingning found a relatively intact stool and sat down. He took a long sigh of relief and said happily, "It's cool. It's a pity that Tong didn't come with me, so no one can appreciate my heroism." "Brother Chu, you did it on purpose, didn't you?" Feng Mu came over with a bitter face and sat down gloomily. Every time he wanted to fight someone, there would always be a cheat back in front of him. Chu Qingning smiled and said, "It's not good for children to fight and kill. I'm doing this for you. Do you understand?" Feng Mu's face immediately darkened. Not to mention anything else, when he was in the spiritual circle, he had killed at least 800 warriors. It was not a big deal to steal people's lives. There was no need to talk about doing good deeds. "Hiss you! Who are you? You dare to fight against my He family. You will regret it." Chapter 304. Regret. Chu Qingning raised his eyebrows and stepped on the fat servant's chest. He laughed and said, "I have never regretted in my life. Can you show me regret?" The fat servant was stepped on and vomited blood. He was terrified and wanted to escape with his hands. "Madman, you are a madman. You dare to treat me like this. My he family is not easy to deal with. You wait." Bang! Noisy. Chu Qingning impatiently slapped the fat servant unconscious. The rest of the servants saw that he was so miserable. They crawled and gathered together. They didn't dare to say a word, which was similar to those frightened diners just now. Finally, it's quiet. Chu Qingning glanced at the diners who had almost run away. He turned back and asked, "Brother Luo, where are we going next?" Luo Yichen's eyes narrowed slightly. He thought for a moment and said, "Brother Chu, please deal with these people. Before we start, I want to go to my home first." Chu Qingning smiled and said, "Hey, it's easy. You go home first. After we've dealt with these people, we can ask around and we'll be able to find you." Luo Yichen went out and took off a black cloth hat from Yun Yi's horse. Then he disappeared in the street. Yun Yi glanced at the trembling innkeeper and put 3 golden leaves on the counter. He said lightly, "It's none of your business." When the innkeeper saw the golden leaves, his gray eyes immediately brightened. These 3 golden leaves were enough to buy 10 inns as big as his. With the money, he could completely change a place to make a comeback. Thinking of this, the innkeeper suppressed the fear in his heart and thanked Yun Yi repeatedly. After dealing with the affairs of the inn, Yun Yi walked to the backyard and saw a group of servants of the He family who had been tightly tied up. He nodded and said, "It's okay to leave them here for at least half a day. Let's go to the Luo family." When Chu Qingning heard this, he immediately shook his head and said, "Hey, don't worry. Let's have a drink here and leave in 2 hours. Luo Yichen obviously wants to go back alone. Isn't it inappropriate for us to go now?" Yun Yi was slightly stunned. Thinking of the situation when Luo Yichen left, he couldn't help sighing with emotion. "I didn't expect you to be so careful." Chu Qingning was unhappy when he was drinking. He said, "What are you talking about? I have always been so excellent. Okay? It's just that Su Li and Feng Yuan have no chance to perform." Yun Yi couldn't help laughing. He also sat down, poured a glass of wine, and slowly tasted it. He didn't argue with Chu Qingning anymore. In the eastern part of Fallen Moon City, there was a house that looked a bit old. At this moment, the door to the courtyard was open and lanterns and streamers could be seen everywhere. Servants and maids in new clothes came and went, as well as guests dressed in luxurious clothing. An old butler stood at the door, constantly nodding and bowing as he received guests. Although there was a smile on his face, it was even uglier than crying, and there was even helplessness between his brows. His eyes were gray and muddy, as if he had lost the energy, and spirit that he relied on to comfort himself. The guests seemed to be too lazy to bother with him and walked straight into the courtyard. Alas, the Mrs. Marriage will completely ruin this family. The old butler sighed deeply. Suddenly, he felt that the light in front of him dimmed. He looked up and saw a tall man in black in front of him. The man wore a black bamboo hat with a long sword on his waist, and his face couldn't be seen clearly. This child, Luo Yichen, stared at the wrinkled old man in front of him and didn't answer. In the past 7 years, the hale and hearty Butler Wu in his memory had become so old. Butler Wu stared at him. Although the figure of the man in front of him was very strange, somehow he felt a sense of familiarity from the bottom of his heart. The first master? How could it be possible? The first master had passed away for 7 years. The miss was unwilling to set up a memorial tablet. She had asked people to look for him secretly these years, but they couldn't even find his shadow. If the first master was still alive, how could there be no news from him? Thinking of this, Butler Wu couldn't help but smile bitterly and asked, "Child, are you also here for the banquet?" Luo Yichen was excited, but the words were suddenly stuck in his throat. He couldn't say it. There was a rare trace of fear in his heart. In the hearts of the family, he might have died long ago. After all the troubles in those years were caused by him killing He Jinling in a rage. Now he suddenly appeared. What would the reaction of his parents and sister be? Would they be happy or resentful? Seeing that Luo Yichen didn't respond for a long time, Butler Wu only thought that he was a cold guest. He immediately made a gesture and reminded him, "Child, please take a seat. The banquet is about to begin. However, in order to avoid making others unhappy, you'd better take off the bamboo hat." Hearing this, Luo Yichen pulled the bamboo hat lower and said in a hoarse voice, "I won't go in. Which family does Luo Yingying marry?" At this moment, he had made up his mind. If his sister married a good family and the family situation was also good, there was no need for him to break the rare peace. After getting rid of the He family, he could secretly support them and end the cause and effect. Butler Wu was stunned when he heard Luo Yichen's question. Immediately, his expression changed. He murmured in surprise and doubt. "Child Fan hasn't given up yet?" No. Child Fan has long been under house arrest." Although there were many people at this moment, and Butler Wu's murmur was as low as a mosquito, Luo Yichen still heard it clearly. "Child Fan. Fan Tianxing." Butler Wu was shocked when he heard it. His eyes lit up. "Child Fan really sent you." Then he cautiously glanced at the courtyard. Seeing that the guests hadn't noticed them, he immediately pulled Luo Yichen to the courtyard next door. "Come with me." Luo Yichen frowned and let Butler Wu pull him to a place with fewer people. Then he asked, "What the hell is going on? Why is Tianxing under house arrest when Yingying is married?" Butler Wu was nervous and didn't notice that Luo Yichen called him intimately. He hurriedly said, "Since you are the helper invited by Child Fan, don't think so much. Take Miss away quickly. Go." Luo Yichen stopped and said coldly, "Why? Where are you going?" When Luo Yichen stopped, Butler Wu, who was in a hurry, stopped abruptly. Hearing Luo Yichen's tone, Butler Wu blamed the person invited by Child Fan for being unreliable. But he could only explain, after old master fell ill, Miss was the only backbone of the family. How could she get married? Father fell ill. 7 years had passed, and she was already 24 years old. For the sake of the family, she had never married. When Luo Yichen heard the news, he was slightly shocked, and his blood was boiling. This time, Miss was forced to get married by the He family. Child Fan was so angry that he wanted to save Mississippi. But before he could do it, he was under house arrest by the family. So, Miss had no choice but to agree to He family's request on the surface. In fact, she had been waiting for Child Fan to send someone to save her. Luo Yichen took a deep breath. He family? He Jinling is dead. Is there any man in He family? Seeing that Luo Yichen still had questions, Butler Wu was anxious and complained, "Oh, you are paid to do things. Just go with me. When did I say that Miss was going to marry He family? He family specially found a ruffian to humiliate Mississippi. If you don't go now, it will be too late after the banquet ends." It turned out to be like this. Luo Yichen's expression changed immediately. He reached out to lift Butler Wu and rushed to the backyard as fast as lightning. Butler Wu rode on the cloud and dizzily saw the surrounding scene shaking. Then he arrived in front of Mrs. Yard. He couldn't help but be shocked and then overjoyed. Child Fan could invite such a master. Miss would be saved. At this moment, he was ecstatic, and he didn't feel strange that a stranger could be so familiar with the layout of Luo family. Yingying still lives here. Luo Yichen stood still and put down Butler Wu. A trace of reminiscence flashed through his eyes. Then he pushed the door and walked into the yard. At this moment, he didn't hesitate anymore. Butler Wu happily walked to the door and laughed. Miss, Child Fan's people are here. Butler Wu, come in with that gentleman." As soon as he finished speaking, a female voice came from the room, which made Luo Yichen slightly absent-minded. The voice was still the same, but the tone of speaking was completely different from 7 years ago. It was less naive and weak, but more strong and sophisticated. How did a 17-year-old girl support this family under the He family strife for 7 years? He couldn't imagine. Creak! The wooden door made a light sound. The person in the room came into view, which made Butler Wu and Luo Yichen stunned at the same time. The girl sitting at the dressing table was wearing a phoenix crown and a red cape. Her makeup was exquisite, and she was extremely beautiful. But different from those delicate ladies, her lips were tightly closed, and her eyes were firm, as if she wouldn't change her expression even if a mountain collapsed in front of her. At this moment, Luo Yichin actually saw the shadow of Su Li in her. "Miss, why are you still wearing this? Didn't I prepare made clothes for you?" Butler Wu was so anxious that his forehead was sweating. He rushed into the room to find made clothes for Luo Yingying to change into. Luo Yingying shook her head and stopped him. Her eyes were firm and calm. "I won't leave. If I leave, he family will be angry. What about father? What about you?" Then she looked at Luo Yichin, who stood still at the door, and apologized. "I'm so sorry to let you come here in vain. Please thank Child Fan for me. Thanks to his protection these years, our Luo family can continue to survive. But this time, Yingying can't hurt him no matter what." Although the Fan family was quite powerful, they were no match for the mighty He family, who was a relative of the emperor. The head of the Fan family, who had always doted on his son, had seen this, which was why he had ruthlessly imprisoned Fan Tianqing. Luo Yichin was silent, and his body didn't move at all. Seeing that, Luo Yingying was confused and said again, "Your Excellency?" This time, there was finally a response. Luo Yichin moved. He slowly walked to the front of his mother's memorial tablet, which he saw at a glance when he entered the room. Under Luo Yingying's puzzled gaze, he silently burned an incense stick and finally said, "When did Mother die?" Chapter 305. Luo Yingying stared blankly at the back of the figure that was facing her. The more she looked at that tall and straight figure, the more familiar it became. Finally, it gradually overlapped with the youth in her memory. Was it him? Was it the one who had been dead for 7 years in her memory? Luo Yingying's eyes turned red instantly. She subconsciously took 2 steps forward and suddenly stopped. Her lips trembled. She pointed to the memorial tablet and asked again and again, What did you call her?" Alas, Luo Yichin sighed with mixed feelings under the black bamboo hat. He slowly turned around and took off the bamboo hat, trying to make himself smile more naturally. "Little sister, I'm back." Dong! The dagger hidden in the sleeve fell to the ground, making a dull sound. When she saw that angular and mature face, her first reaction wasn't joy. Instead, her beautiful face paled and she staggered backwards. "Be careful," Luo Yichin immediately whispered and flashed forward to hold her arms. As soon as they touched, Luo Yingying retracted her hands as if she got an electric shock. Then she seemed to realize something in the air. Just now, she seemed to have touched a real person. Was it not an illusion? Luo Yingying hesitated for a moment. Looking at Luo Yichin, who was confused and distressed in front of her, she seemed to summon up great courage. She bit her lips and slowly touched his cheek with her delicate palm. At that moment, a real and warm feeling spread through her entire body. Tears blurred her eyes, shattering all the strength she had put up. "I'm not dreaming. It's true, eldest brother. Eldest brother. Why didn't you come back for so many years? I thought you were dead. 7 years. 7 years." Luo Yingying hugged Luo Yichin tightly and buried her head in his chest. The whisper gradually turned into a heart-wrenching cry. All kinds of sufferings in the past 7 years broke out like a mountain torrent. Luo Yichin's eyes were red and his throat was choked. He could only let Luo Yingying hold him and couldn't say a word. Butler Wu, who stood aside for a long time, couldn't help crying when he saw the brother and sister repeating the same words. "God bless. Young master is still alive. It's good that he's alive." Suddenly, Uncle Wu thought of something and his face changed. He didn't want to disturb the reunion of the two. He went up and said, "First, young master, Miss, we can talk about it later. We can't stay here. Let's hurry up and escape." Luo Yingying raised her head with a start and also reacted. She hurriedly said, "Big brother, hurry up and hide. If the family finds out that you're still alive, it'll be terrible. As for me, Then she looked at Luo Yichen reluctantly with tears in her beautiful eyes. She gritted her teeth and said, I appreciate your kindness, but I can't go. When Uncle Wu heard this, he sighed sorrowfully. He was about to say something when an exasperated scream suddenly came from outside the house. None of you can leave. Before he finished his words, a large group of people rushed into the room aggressively. Luo Yichen actually knew the leader. It was Luo Mei who made trouble in Tianjin before. Sure, Luo Yichen, how dare you swagger back after being sent to the frontier? Do you think the law of Tianjin country is just for show? Luo Mei sneered and waved her hand. She said, take him back and send him to the government office for punishment. Luo Mei. Luo Yingying said with a cold face, this is the Luo family. How can you mess around here? He is just a senior invited by child fan. I won't go with him. Why do you vent your anger on innocent people? Luo Mei seemed to have heard an extremely funny joke. She held her belly and laughed. After a long time, she was out of breath and mocked. Miss Luo, do I look so easy to be deceived? Just now when I was outside, I heard it clearly. You called me big brother so intimately. I almost cried when I heard it. It turns out that you have already arrived. Luo Yingying looked solemn and stood in front of Luo Yichen to protect him. She said, if you want to catch my big brother, you have to step over my dead body. Jin Wei wants to humiliate me. If you kill me, I'm afraid it's not easy to explain. Luo Mei snorted, naive. Do you want to stop me? Go and control Luo Yingying first. After giving the order, Luo Mei waited for a long time, but there was no movement behind her. Her face suddenly darkened. She turned around and scolded. What are you waiting for? Are you stupid? The middle-aged guard frowned and still didn't move. Luo Mei was a shrew. She didn't recognize Luo Yichen, but it didn't mean that he had no impression. He remembered that when they were in the Tianjin Inn, Luo Yichen stood very close to the young man. He thought that his status must be high, and he also heard that the girl had a close relationship with the fourth prince. No, now it should be the crown prince. Just when he was hesitating, Luo Mei almost went crazy and scolded. How dare you? How dare you? A mere guard dares to disobey my orders. All of you go. He doesn't want to live. Do you want to die with him? Hearing this, the other guards who were still listening to the middle-aged guard suddenly moved. Luo Yingying's face turned pale. Her cultivation was just in the acquired realm. She couldn't resist so many warriors of the inborn realm. Little sister, stand with Butler Wu. Don't run around. Suddenly, an extremely soft force dragged her to Butler Wu. Then she saw Luo Yichen's figure flashed out like a flickering light. The sword at his waist suddenly soared and crossed the void. Puff, puff, puff. There were 3 light sounds. The heads of the 3 guards who rushed in the front fell. Oh no, it's a senior. Retreat. The rest of the warriors of the inborn realm suddenly changed their faces and retreated quickly. But Luo Yichen, who was full of killing intent, wouldn't let them go. He snorted and floated to catch up with them. In the blink of an eye, he stopped in front of them and waved his sword. From the moment you decided to take action, you should be prepared to be killed. Now go to hell. Luo Yichen looked indifferent. He pierced the chest of the nearest guard with his sword and cut off half of the cheek of another guard. It was like cutting melons and vegetables. He killed most of the guards in a short time. Run. Mercy, I won't work for your family anymore. Mercy. No matter how the rest begged, he only got a decisive sword in response. The middle-aged guard stood aside and even breathed carefully. He hoped that his existence could be minimized. He stared blankly at the one-sided massacre in the courtyard. He felt a chill run down his spine and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. This person was definitely an expert at the peak of the innate realm. If he had attacked just now, he would have become one of the corpses. That girl, who is she? The middle-aged guard was frightened and suddenly connected the recent events together. Not long after the girl came to Tantai City, the fourth prince was appointed as the crown prince. Intuition told him that this time he family absolutely provoked a monster that absolutely couldn't be provoked. After a quarter of an hour, the courtyard was silent. except for the middle-aged guard who was wise to protect himself, and he Luo-mei, who was scared. There were no living things. Eldest brother. Luo-ying ran out of the house in panic. Looking at the hellish scene in the courtyard, her pretty face was paler than white paper. You killed people again? And so many people. Eldest young master, the He family will definitely not let this go. Take advantage of the fact that Luoyua City has not been sealed yet. You should quickly escape. Butler Wu was frightened, but he had rich life experience, so his reaction was much smaller than Luo Yingying's. He stepped forward to persuade him. Clang! Luo Yichin swung his long sword, and the blood dripped off the sword. It was as clear as a pool of water. He put the long sword into the sheath unhurriedly. After releasing his depression, his whole spirit had a slight change. He walked to his sister with a faint smile, touched her head, and said softly, Eldest brother is not the same as before. This time, no matter how many people you kill, nothing will happen. Luo Yingying shook her head desperately, and her voice was trembling with fear. Eldest brother, you don't understand at all. He family has become more powerful these years. You can't deal with them alone. Don't try to be brave anymore. Go. Luo Yichin was stunned, and then nodded. You're right. I haven't reached the longevity realm yet. With so many people, I may not be their opponents. But, speaking of this, Luo Yichin smiled lovingly. When did you say that you are fighting alone? Luo Yingying was stunned, but at this moment a long laugh suddenly sounded from outside the courtyard. Ha 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 ha! Brother Luo, I'm not late, am I? At the same time, a group of young people, who were about the same age as Luo Yingying's eldest brother, came in. The leader of the group was smiling, and it was obvious that he was an extroverted man. Eldest brother, these people, Luo Yingying said hesitantly. When Luo Yichin did not answer, Chu Qingming immediately said, Hey, this is little sister Yingying, right? She is really beautiful. I feel happy just by looking at her. If I marry her. Hey. Seeing Chu Qingming's excessive words, Luo Yingying blushed and looked up at Luo Yichin for help. Eldest brother. Luo Yichin's smile remained unchanged, and he said, These words must be your heartfelt words. I will definitely convey them to Miss Yin. Chu Qingming's face instantly darkened, and he quickly pulled Luo Yichin's sleeve. Brother, don't. You know that I just said it for fun. Don't let my wife hear what I said just now, or I will have no pocket money next month. Ha! Chu Qingming was so cowardly that Luo Yingying was immediately amused. She was relieved. It turned out that Chu Qingming's character was very interesting. However, when she thought of the He family, she couldn't help but worry. Feng Mu was careful, and he couldn't help but say with a smile, Miss Luo, don't worry. The He family can't do anything in front of our Linli building. Just wait and see. Although Luo Yingying was still worried in her heart, she couldn't show her worry on the surface. She could only nod. Chu Qingming knew what she was thinking at a glance, and immediately said to Luo Yichin, It seems that your depression is almost gone after the killing. Solve the matter first, and then come back to chat with your sister. Luo Yichin nodded slightly, and his eyes flashed with killing intent. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.